Chapter 30:57. But more people came to fill in the gaps. They didn't care about the deaths of their companions. It was as if the ones who died were unrelated. And those who filled in the gaps were also unafraid of death. They were the true protectors of the evil cultists. Of course, although their faith was firm, it wasn't a good thing. Carrie clenched her teeth. The souls of these evil cultists were even harder to control than the souls of magical beasts. Their depravity had seeped deep into their bones. If you don't want to cooperate, then disappear forever. Carrie instantly controlled the dozen souls to explode on the spot. Creak! At this time, the container surrounded by the evil cultists suddenly emitted a sharp sound. It sounded like a rusty screw being unscrewed. The runes engraved on the container evaporated one by one. Then, the container was pushed away. A woman stood up. She was beautiful, but her skin was completely gray, and she looked lifeless. The woman's expression was also very unnatural. She opened her mouth, tilted her head, and twisted her neck constantly. Gradually, another arm grew out of the woman's back. It was bigger than half of her body. Hungry, the woman uttered a single word, then the arm grabbed the evil cultist in front of her. Ah, sect leader, save me, save me. The cultist did not seem to be resolute enough to sacrifice himself for the god he worshipped. But their god clearly didn't care about their faith. What she cared about was blood. The arm behind the woman grabbed the evil cultist and lifted him above her head. Ah, the evil cultist screamed, then blood was squeezed out of his body. Blood dripped onto the woman's head. The woman opened her mouth and gulped down the blood. Everyone present felt a little nauseous. They had all seen some things that ate people, but they had never seen anyone eat people in this way. She casually threw away the corpse that had been drained of blood, but she had just eaten his blood, so she showed a look of disgust. The woman looked around, then her gaze fell on the maternal liquid demon. The demon cursed inwardly. This woman gave him a very, very bad feeling, but he couldn't escape. As soon as he took a step back, the chains bound him. The woman's arm grew larger and longer, grabbing at the demon. The demon immediately transformed into his true form. However, when he was halfway to his original form, the huge hand had seized him. "Let go!" Grandmother Liquid Demon roared. However, that woman was clearly not the type to listen to orders. Bung! The chains on the Mother Liquid Demon's body broke one by one. That woman actually destroyed the seal of the maternal liquid monster. However, the Mother Liquid Demon broke free from the shackles of the seal. But he couldn't get rid of that woman's hand. This time, the woman didn't drain the Mother Liquid Demon dry. A mouth appeared on her palm, and she began to stuff the Mother Liquid Demon into it. The Grandmother Liquid monster wailed and struggled. That voice incited everyone present. The Mother Liquid Demon was unwilling to be devoured just like that. However, that woman's strength was indeed not something she could contend against. However, her seal had been lifted. She could no longer use spells. The maternal liquid monster suddenly spat out a mouthful of black water. Immediately after, the Mother Liquid Demon also lost its vitality. However, the puddle of black water on the ground converged and turned back into a human form. Obviously, she was the maternal liquid demon. This method of severing one's arm to survive caused her to lose 90% of her cultivation and magic power. The woman who devoured most of the grandmother liquid demon's cultivation began to have more aura. Behind her, a gray magic formation opened up. The magic formation was very complicated, with various known and unknown religious symbols. Great God! The red-robed religious leader knelt on the ground in excitement. The other cultists also knelt and worshipped. The grandmother liquid demon glanced at the cultists. There was no hope there. She then turned to look at the people of the Duke's mansion. Of course, her attention was still on Carrie and Xiao He. "Listen, we must work together now, or else all of us will die. You're no different from her," Xiao He said coldly. "You're all cannibals. What right do you have to ask us to work together? I'm not the same as her. She's a resurrected god's corpse. Other than eating, this thing can't communicate at all. At least I can joke around with you. Didn't she resurrect? A dead god is dead. How can there be resurrection? As a dead god, her divinity and power have all been lost, and her soul has also dissipated. Right now, she's just a powerful corpse. She needs to fill the emptiness of the dead, so she needs to keep eating, but the dead can't keep the nutrients. They can only be turned into power or lost. As soon as the grandmother liquid demon finished speaking, a scream came from the cultists. Their god had started to act against her believers. God, they're all your people, the red-robed religious leader shouted. The god glanced at the red-robed religious leader and smiled, a cold smile. This is the result of waking me up. It seemed that even though her soul was gone, she still retained a trace of consciousness. The people of the Duke's mansion felt a chill. The grandmother liquid demon was already so powerful that no one could resist. But she was still pressed to the ground by the resurrected god, almost swallowed whole. Could anyone really stop that god? Carrie and Xiao He glanced at each other. They were both helpless. The grandmother liquid demon wasn't a good thing. But the resurrected god felt even worse. Do you want to cooperate? Carrie asked in a low voice. We can cooperate, Xiao He replied. She's not as much of a threat as before. Carrie nodded. At that moment, the grandmother liquid monster felt 10 times weaker than before. But they weren't happy about it all. After all, the resurrected god was a greater threat to them. The cultists were already covered in blood. Some tried to flee to the Duke's mansion for protection, but they couldn't escape the resurrected god's hunt. Gray figures emerged from the gray magic circle and dragged the cultists into the magic circle. Screams rose and fell. The scene would definitely give people nightmares. We can't win, right? Xiaoyi shrugged and said helplessly, definitely not. We're too weak. Although they didn't plan to surrender. However, they also knew that there was not much point in resisting. The people of the Duke's mansion felt a chill in their hearts. This was the first time they'd heard Xiao He and Carrie speak in such despair. We'll stall her, Carrie said. You guys take the chance to escape. Just then, another person entered the entrance. Which one of you is Miss Carrie? You have an expiring contract that requires your signature. Chapter 3058. By now, the resurrected god had mostly killed the cultists. Seeing the person at the entrance, he charged toward him without hesitation. Then, the person stretched out a finger and flicked the forehead of the resurrected god. Bang! Instantly, the resurrected god was sent flying. His body smashed into the stone wall. The patio was hundreds of meters tall and had a diameter of hundreds of meters. Half of the stone wall was covered in cracks. Everyone widened their eyes and stared at the person in shock. The person walked up to Xiao He and Carrie. Everyone in the Duke's residence was pale with fright. They'd seen how terrifying the resurrected god was. He could kill the grandmother liquid demon instantly. But the person had only used one finger. One finger. Did Xiao He and Carrie have a chance of winning against this person? Impossible. Didn't he see that the two of them were too scared to move? The person raised his hand and slapped Xiao He's head. Xiao He fell to the ground. Miss Wong. Everyone in the Duke's residence was about to charge over. The person turned his head and glanced at them. Scram. Pooh. More than 30 people spat out blood at the same time and lay on the ground. Holding the contract, Chun Zhao placed it in front of Carrie. See if there's a problem. If there's no problem, sign it. Mr. Chun, we're only a few hours late, and this contract seems even worse than what we agreed on. Carrie didn't want to sign because the contract stated that she had to listen to any of Chun Zhao's orders for 10 years. She had to kill 10 disaster-level magical beasts or evil spirits, or even a god-level magical beast for Chun Zhao. She didn't even need to look at the extra conditions. It was impossible. Now, she had to see if she could bargain with Chun Zhao. Moreover, Chun Zhao was fiercer than she'd imagined. The resurrected god was sent flying with a flick of Chun Zhao's finger. Forget it. Since you don't want to sign it, I won't force you. Chun Zhao burned the contract in his hand. Then he replaced it with another contract. Carrie thought that Chun Zhao had changed his mind. But when she looked at the contract, it was 10 times more stringent than the previous one. Mr. Chun, did you take the wrong one? That's right, Chun Zhao said indifferently. He glanced at Bjorn on the ground. This guy is your adoptive father? He looks like he's about to die. I should be the only one who can save him, but it doesn't matter. You guys are going to feed that guy soon anyway." At this time, the resurrected god had regained his vitality. But this time, he didn't attack immediately. Clearly, he was wary of Chun Zhao's power. "Sign this contract, and all of you will be able to leave safely. If you don't, I can watch you all get eaten by him." Xiao He stood up again. She was already used to Chun Zhao hitting her just now. It wasn't Chun Zhao's first time hitting her anyway. "Mr. Chun, I will use my family's treasure to exchange for our safety," Xiao He said. "No need," Chun Zhao rejected directly. Actually, Chun Zhao and West already knew what Xiao He had. To be honest, the thing in Xiao He's hand was a good thing. But Chun Zhao could casually take out hundreds of treasures of the same level. He could even take out dozens of things that were even more valuable than the one in Xiao He's hand. "It's this contract. If you sign it, we can still have fun. If you don't, I'll visit your graves next year." "Mr. Chun," Carrie said with an ugly expression, "I've thought about it. The contract just now suits me better." "Sorry, that contract was burned. I have another one here. If you're interested, you can sign it." Chun Zhao took out another contract. Carrie saw that it was 100 times more expensive than the first one. Carrie's face darkened. She looked at the people in the Duke's mansion and then at her adoptive father. She really wanted to grit her teeth and say, "I won't sign it." But the reality was that she didn't have a second choice. She bit her finger and pressed it on the contract. "Are you happy now?" Carrie said angrily. Chun Zhao glanced at the resurrected god in the distance. Suddenly, he grabbed the air and the resurrected god was pulled before him. Chun Zhao looked at Xiao He. "Aren't you going to try using your family's treasure? You know about it?" Xiao He looked at Chun Zhao, confused. "I investigated it before. It's interesting, but it's also very risky," Chun Zhao said. Actually, the red gas that Xiao He had used earlier was a secret treasure of the God Refinement sect. It wasn't physical, but a type of gas called spiritual qi. Only by combining the God Refinement sect's techniques and spiritual qi could it be truly effective. Not only could spiritual qi transform into various weapons, but it also had the ability to extract the soul and refine the blood of the enemies it killed. In the past, the God Refinement sect wasn't a proper sect. Killing people and refining blood was real. But in modern times, the God Refinement sect had basically turned over a new leaf. Even if they used animals to cultivate, it was fine. Although the essence qi and blood were less than a human's, if the quantity was large, it wouldn't be much worse than a human's. Plus, it was safer and no one would blame them. But the God Refinement sect was getting worse with each generation. Actually, it was because the God Refinement sect hid the most important thing. This was spiritual qi. This was the true treasure of the God Refinement sect. Enemies hit and killed by the spiritual qi would have their essence qi and blood extracted, directly increasing the user's cultivation. It could be said that this thing was a divine weapon in battle. The more they fought, the stronger they got. Were you afraid? But using spiritual qi had a disadvantage. Instead of refining it, it would directly fuse into one's own essence qi and dermic powers. It was more or less a supernatural version of the Dark North divine art. If one absorbed too much, the various dermic powers would clash with each other, causing chaos in one's mind and dermic powers. For example, just now, Xiao He had used spiritual qi to extract essence qi from dark demonic beasts several times to refine herself. Her power had increased by leaps and bounds in a short time. But that was basically Xiao He's upper limit. Of course, it wouldn't be a problem to swallow more. But then, Xiao He would probably rebel on the spot. Everyone in the Duke's mansion watched as the arrogant god was dragged before Chun Zhao and stepped on. They felt their scalps go numb. Xiao He didn't dare to extract this thing's essence qi and blood. Regardless of whether he was a god or not, he definitely exceeded her limit. Whatever, Huowu come out. He's your midnight snack. Huowu left Carrie's body, but he didn't have the strength to eat a god. He was just as worried as Xiao He that he would be stuffed to death. This thing could really stuff him to death. Maybe one drop of blood would do. After all, there was a huge difference in power. One drop of blood was already the limit. Looks like you won't be able to enjoy it. Whatever, I'll take it back and make it into medicinal wine." Everyone was speechless. In their eyes, it was something that could be used to make medicinal wine. In Chun Zhao's eyes, it was something to make medicinal wine. Chapter 3059. Chun Zhao picked up Bjorn and poured a perfect demonic crystal potion into his mouth. Carrie walked over to the Duke's mansion and explained the situation to them. Everyone in the Duke's mansion was in disbelief. That guy was Xiao He and Carrie's teacher? Wasn't that too unbelievable? No, it was the opposite. That was more reasonable. If there wasn't such a terrifying teacher, how could he have taught Carrie and Xiao He to be so powerful? Now, everyone in the Duke's mansion was a bit jealous. In front of their teacher, the resurrected god was as weak as a child. He was just a bit stricter. When he'd arrived, he'd slap Xiao He to the ground. They must have felt that Xiao He and Carrie didn't perform well enough. But they felt that Xiao He and Carrie had already performed very well. But with such a teacher, it was understandable that they were stricter. Just then, Carrie took out a finger. Chun Zhao had broken off from the resurrected god. "This is for you." Everyone in the Duke's mansion was confused. "Miss Carrie, what are you going to do with this? Don't tell me you want us to use it to create those fusion monsters? What are you thinking? This is a very good raw material for magic tools. If you find a powerful alchemist and use this as the basic material, you can create powerful magic tools. Of course, there won't be many of them, but they're very valuable. Xiao He and I are leaving. We might not have the chance to meet again, so consider this a gift from us." Everyone in the Duke's mansion was dazed. They also realized how precious this god's finger was. But when they remembered that Carrie and Xiao He were about to leave, they couldn't be happy anymore. However, they could understand it. After all, their teacher was so powerful. Xiao He and Carrie, on the other hand, had clearly not reached the heights their teacher had hoped for. So, it was natural that they would be taken away to continue cultivating. Everyone in the Duke's mansion followed Chun Zhao out of the relic. "I'm leaving now. You two better not make me come to you again. I'll give you 24 hours. With that, Chun Zhao flew into the air. It was the first time the Duke's mansion had seen someone fly. Everyone's eyes were filled with longing. They were filled with envy and jealousy. In their eyes, Xiao He and Jolly Wen were experts among experts. As for their teacher who could fly, he was probably an expert among experts. Of course, they didn't know what the levels were, or rather, they weren't very clear about it. Just being able to fly was already shocking enough. How could Carrie and Xiao He dare to delay? In just a few hours, Chun Zhao had Carrie sign a 100-year contract. If it went any further, Chun Zhao might make them slaves for the rest of their lives. Chun Zhao could really do something like that. As for Bayan, Xiao He and Carrie had asked the Duke's mansion to help him get a proper identity in Switzerland. At the same time, they had also left him some money, enough for him to start a small business. The familiar air, what a familiar scenery. Xiao He and Jolly Wen stood at the exit of the airport. Xiao He held a pot of black flowers in her arms. It had been more than 10 days. Carrie and Xiao He did not know what they were feeling right now. Do you miss this city? Just a little. But more than that, it was fear. After all, there was someone in this city that they feared. That was someone who could kill God. Maybe not a real God, but it was still enough to make their hair stand on end. The grandmother liquid demon was following them now. After being glared at by Chun Zhao yesterday, the granny demon was completely terrified. It was really too scary. Not to mention that she only had 10% of her cultivation left. Even if she was at 100%, she would probably be smashed to pieces by Chun Zhao with one slap. So, she decided to join the enemy and express that she was willing to be Xiao He and Carrie's follower and follow them everywhere. "Hey, Mr. Chun, we're back in LA. Go home by yourself. There's a new training plan starting at night," Chun Zhao said briefly and hung up. In fact, before Carrie and Xiao He entered the ruins yesterday, Chun Zhao had already found them through the contract. After all, one of them had been taken care of by West and the other by Li Qing. Nothing could happen to either of them, so Chun Zhao could only control the situation early. He would act when the two of them really couldn't handle it. Without a doubt, the resurrected god was too much for them now. Even if it wasn't a real god and didn't even have 10% of God's power. Still, it wasn't something they could deal with. Even the grandmother liquid demon's body was too much for them. But Carrie and Xiaohe's performance was really good. Chun Zhao didn't expect them to be able to fight the grandmother liquid demon so well in the early stages. After returning home, the two rested for a bit. When the sky darkened, their biological clocks woke them up automatically. Glancing at the time, they knew it was almost time. They hurried to fill their stomachs. Chun Zhao knocked on the door. After entering, he glanced at the food on the table. "I'll give you 5 minutes to eat your fill and then get in the car." They were already used to Chun Zhao's simple and direct communication method. After sweeping away the food on the table, they hurried into Chun Zhao's car. "Mr. Chun, this is the way to the Supernatural Organization's headquarters, right?" Xiaohe had been there before. Carrie hadn't, but she knew that Chun Zhao was the president of the Supernatural Organization. After all, she'd thrown herself into the psionic team's embrace with her head. Chun Zhao had almost slapped her to death. But after these days of growth, her horizons and experience had improved a lot. She felt that her initial choice had been extremely stupid. After arriving at the headquarters, Chun Zhao brought Carrie and Xiaohe into the Tower of Trials. "Press your palms on the door, both of you. Your mission is to stay inside for 10 minutes. The two stared at the tall tower before them. What was this tower? Was there something inside? Was there some evil spirit or magical beast locked inside? Before they could figure out, they were suddenly teleported into the Tower of Trials. Chun Zhao stood before the tower and counted the time on his stopwatch. In less than 5 minutes, 2 white lights flashed before him, and the two fell to the ground. The two were still immersed in the fear of death. I'm not dead," Carrie asked. "What's going on?" Xiaohe's expression was also one of bewilderment. Less than 10 minutes. How disappointing. Chun Zhao shook his head. Chapter 3060. Both of their faces were pale. At that moment, they thought that they were really going to die in there. Unexpectedly, they were back here in the blink of an eye. "Mr. Chun, what exactly happened just now?" You can think of the experience as a high-level illusion. In fact, everything in the Tower of Trials was real. It wasn't much different from the trial grounds that Chun Zhao had created. However, there was still a fundamental difference between the two. It was a difference in the rules. If the trial grounds that Chun Zhao had created died, they would really die. This was because the trial grounds that Chun Zhao had created relied on the rules of the current world. Everything in the Tower of Trials had different rules. For example, life and death weren't so obvious in the Tower of Trials. The rules were power that even Chun Zhao couldn't fathom right now. For example, Blackie controlled the power of life and death, but even he couldn't not die or revive. In the Tower of Trials, the boundaries between life and death weren't so clear. As the creator of the Tower of Trials, the handsome guy, perhaps he truly controlled life and death. Perhaps he wasn't truly unkillable. However, the method to kill him was definitely not something that Chun Zhao could imagine, because his power was already unimaginable and unbelievable. "Can we experience the illusion again?" Carrie looked at Chun Zhao expectantly. She and Xiaohe obviously knew what the Tower of Trials meant. "Next week," Chun Zhao said. "You only have 1 chance per week." Both of them were somewhat disappointed, but people who entered the Tower of Trials for the first time all felt the same. Not everyone liked to enter the Tower of Trials. After all, in the Tower of Trials, all the senses were real. The pain was real too. However, once a week was a bit long for Xiaohe and Jollywen. 1/16 of the Supernatural Youth Fighting Tournament had already passed. After the previous round of eliminations, the remaining contestants were basically all outstanding. They were all well-rounded. Disser and Sylvia had successfully advanced in the previous round. However, they hadn't teamed up in the previous round. Instead, they competed separately. Therefore, it was very difficult for them. It wasn't an absolute conclusion before the competition. However, it was very likely that they'd be eliminated this round. Through Chun Zhao, Carrie, and Xiaohe also found out about the competition. Of course, they couldn't participate even if they wanted to. After all, they were already halfway there, and Carrie and Xiaohe were already 1 or 2 years older than the age limit of 22. However, they still managed to get tickets through Chun Zhao. The venue was a rented stadium. The stadium was closed externally. When the two arrived at the stadium, there were already many spectators gathered there. Some were eliminated in the early stages, while others were people from the supernatural world. There were almost no ordinary people at the scene. If he hadn't come here, he wouldn't have known that there were so many people in the supernatural world. There were at least 1,000 spectators in the stadium. Although compared to the 10,000 seats, the audience was still relatively sparse. However, this wasn't a normal sport competition. It was a supernatural combat competition. A high platform was erected in the middle of the stadium. West was the referee for today's match. The first round is 16. Contestants 1 and 32 can go on stage now. At West's request, the two contestants entered the arena. Xiaohe, who do you think will win? Carrie looked at the two contestants in the arena. Looking at the two contestants, Xiaohe was silent for a while. Judging from their auras, the one on the left is stronger, while the one on the right seems to practice dark magic. He's more offensive, so the one on the left is stronger in cultivation and has the advantage in attributes. It's hard to say who will win. The two weren't betting. Instead, they were using their own knowledge and judgment to analyze. They would analyze every contestant in each group. After 3 groups, they guessed 2 correctly and 1 incorrectly. Just then, Chen Zhao came and sat beside them. The two immediately became cautious. Before Chen Zhao, they still had that timid and fearful attitude. Chen Zhao didn't care about their attitude. He just watched the competition normally. However, after a while, Chen Zhao found it boring. It couldn't be helped. The level of the competition was too low. It felt like a kindergarten taekwondo competition. That was the concept. What do you think of their skills? Chen Zhao suddenly asked. Carrie and Xiaohe looked at each other. How should they answer? Not bad. It felt like they were lying with their eyes open. Even the two of them could feel that the level of the contestants in the arena was simply too weak. A few of them were almost at the level of the people from the Duke's residence. Some were even worse. It was said that this was the result after 2 or 3 rounds of selection. They really didn't know how messy it was at the beginning. So, Chen Zhao definitely didn't ask this question to let them choose something nice. I feel like I can beat them all if I go down alone. Carrie wasn't talking nonsense. This was a judgment she'd made after evaluating the contestants' abilities. But as soon as she said it, she regretted it. She felt that Chen Zhao would cause trouble because of her words. Fine, I won't make things difficult for you. After the competition ends, you and Xiaohe can attack the contestants' carriages. Carrie took a deep breath. Indeed, what she feared had come true. Chen Zhao wouldn't let them have a good life. However, given the level of the people in the arena, if there wasn't a sudden change in style, even double the number wouldn't be a threat to her and Xiaohe. What should we do? Xiaohe asked. You can bring all your equipment. After the competition ends, the contestants will gather and return to the hotel. You can attack them on the way. Other than not killing them, you can do whatever you want. Just as Carrie was about to speak, Xiaohe immediately pulled Carrie back. Xiaohe was afraid that Carrie would stubbornly say that they didn't need equipment. But Chen Zhao thought about it and suddenly changed his mind. No, they just finished the competition. They're definitely not in good condition. You'll have too much of an advantage. Xiaohe and Carrie were speechless. They felt like Chen Zhao was having fun, not testing the contestants. How about we go big? Carrie said, we'll use the New Age Church's operation in Switzerland as the script. Huh? What do you think? Give all 16 contestants an identity and play it like a large-scale, real RPG game. As long as each character reaches the goal, they pass the test. Interesting. Chen Zhao chuckled. Any specific ideas? Chapter 3061. Ao Delan, there are still 2 days until the next match. Do you want to go out and play? No, I have to train, Ao Delan said. The contestants stayed in a suite for 2, Alderman and Manette together. However, their personalities were completely opposite. Manette was casual and good at making friends. Ao Delan was more solitary. He didn't interact with anyone other than Manette during the match. Manette usually asked Ao Delan to go out and play, but Ao Delan always refused. Manette was already used to it. Then I'll go out and play alone. Do you need me to bring you food? No need. Ao Delan shook his head. Don't tire yourself out. In that case, goodbye. Manet changed his clothes and went out. Not long after Manet left, A.O. Deland heard the door open. Why is Manet back so soon? A.O. Deland frowned. No, it's not Manet's voice. Room service? That's not it either. The organizer had already booked this floor and canceled all room service. A.O. Deland immediately stood up and took out his magic tool. A.O. Deland saw two women standing outside the door. Who are you? You are A.O. Deland? I am. Who are you? We are the organizer. You have a mission. Carrie took out a bag and handed it to A.O. Deland. What mission? Before the next round begins, we will play a little game. Of course, you can also treat this as the next round of the competition. I don't understand. A.O. Deland was still cautious and didn't open the bag. Simply put, it's an RPG game. Do you understand? All contestants will receive a character. Your mission and character description are in the bag. You can see for yourself. Carrie said, All right, quickly get in a character. We still have to make arrangements for the others. Manet also has one? He has one. Carrie nodded. What's his character? Although we don't forbid you from revealing your character, we don't recommend it either. Revealing your character means you might be targeted, especially when you have a special identity. A.O. Deland didn't ask anything else. After Carrie and Xiao He left, A.O. Deland opened the bag. There were 3 cards inside. There are also a few magic tools. Identity card, Hero, 1 set of hero equipment set. Justice will prevail. When the battalion you belong to wins, you will receive plus 5 points. ID card, Magic Breaker ring. Contemporarily, take the magic of the target you destroy as your own. You need to eliminate at least 4 magical characters from the opposing faction. When you complete the identity quest, you will receive plus 5 points. Identity card, Monitor, Lock of Truth. Use chains to bind the target of your suspicion. They will not be able to lie. You need to find at least 1 traitor. When you complete the mission, you will receive plus 5 points. Furthermore, the traitor has already seen through your role as a supervisor. The traitor possesses methods that can threaten your life. Please treat this with caution. Just as A.O. Deland finished looking at the 3 identity cards, the cards were ignited and burned to ashes in an instant. Then, there was a rule manual. A.O. Deland was a little surprised. This competition could be played like this? At this moment, another sound came from outside the door. Then Manet came back. Manet, why are you back so soon? Manet shook the bag in his hand. You got it too? A.O. Deland nodded. A.O. Deland was about to ask about Manet's identity when he suddenly stopped. Look at your identity, right? A.O. Deland asked. Manet smiled and nodded. I'll go back to my room first. The two were already very familiar with each other and knew each other inside out. But according to the rules of this game, from now on, they might be opponents. At least, before the other's identity was clear. A.O. Deland also returned to his room with his magic equipment. A.O. Deland put on a ring with the word Young on it. Instantly, a set of silver armor appeared on A.O. Deland's body. He looked like a hero from a magical RPG game. A.O. Deland sucked in a breath of cold air. This set of equipment must have cost a lot. Then, A.O. Deland tried the Lock of Truth and Magic Breaker ring. They were both very powerful magic equipment. A.O. Deland couldn't help but sigh. This supernatural organization was really rich. Just then, Manet knocked on the door. A.O. Deland opened the door. Manet looked A.O. Deland up and down. A.O. Deland also looked Manet up and down. Manet was wearing a different set. It was more like a magic equipment. What's your first identity? Manet asked. My first identity is a hero, A.O. Deland answered. The first identity was obvious. There was no need to hide it. At least, if one knew a little, they would know each other's identities. The second identity was semi-hidden. If one completed a specific mission, it would be easier to be discovered. The third identity was absolutely hidden. As long as one couldn't completely confirm the other's identity, they couldn't be exposed. Being exposed meant danger or being eliminated. I'm a spellcaster, Manet said. This set of equipment has doubled my elemental magic. That's amazing. My equipment isn't weak either. I can feel my muscles rumbling. Power is flowing into my body endlessly. I'm starting to get excited about this game, Manette said with a smile. Manette, you're smarter. Try and guess what other information isn't written in the rules. Manette thought about it and said, the first identity is a profession. There's nothing much to say. The victory and defeat of the faction represents points. The second identity is a personal mission. I'm guessing that this personal mission is different for everyone. The third and fourth identities are hidden attributes that will give the participants unexpected benefits. Ao DeLuan's heart jumped. Fourth identity? There was a fourth identity. In other words, Manette had 4 identities. Could he be the traitor? Manette glanced at Audrin and chuckled. Looks like something I said caught your attention. Is it the fourth identity I mentioned? So, you're different from me. You have 3 identities? Or 5 people with different identities? I personally think there are 3 identities. I am. Don't tell me your hidden identity. No matter how much you trust me, don't expose yourself. Otherwise, the game will lose its fun. No matter what, please pass this round. Manette waved his hand and continued. The second is the opposing faction. Originally, I guess that would be the other contestants, but after thinking about it, it might not be the other contestants. Because of the number of people, there are currently 16 contestants. Unless the 16 contestants are roughly divided into 2 groups, 16 contestants is too few. An 8-on-8 game is very boring. So, I'm more inclined to believe that the opposing faction would be someone other than the contestants. Chapter 3062. Just as Manette and Audrin were discussing and analyzing the situation, a broadcast suddenly rang out, telling them to gather at the designated location within a limited time. Manette and Audrin quickly packed up their things and set off. It would appear that the game was about to begin. If they did not arrive within the limited time, they might be eliminated or have their points deducted. When the 2 of them arrived at the designated location, someone else had already arrived. The designated location was the lake at the center of the forest where the first trial had started. The remaining participants were no strangers to this place. One after another, the 16 contestants arrived. At that moment, Carrie and Xiaohe arrived as well. Carrie clapped her hands and said, "Everyone, come over here." Everyone gathered in front of Carrie and Xiaohe. All of you should understand the rules this time, right? If there is anything you do not understand, you can raise it now. I have a question. Carrie looked at the participant who had raised the question. Do you have a question? All right. You are now eliminated. You still have a question now? Either you have no brains or you are not serious. Carrie pointed at the participant who had raised the question. The ring on Carrie's finger suddenly flashed with light. The participant was lifted into the air by an invisible force and thrown out of the forest. This scene was not unfamiliar to the participants at all. All right, the small fries are gone. Now, do you have any questions? The remaining 15 participants expressed that they had no questions. What a joke. One person had been eliminated just because of a disagreement. Who would dare to raise a question at a time like this? Since it's a fake RPG plot, there needs to be a main plot. The bad guys want to break the seal of the evil god, and your mission is to stop the evil god's seal from being broken or to reseal the god after the evil god is broken. After saying that, Carrie took out a map and distributed it to everyone. This is the game map. If you leave the range of the map, you will be directly eliminated. The game will end after one side wins. Xiaohe stepped forward and said, "All right, that's the general introduction of the game. Let me remind you that she has provided a lot of information. You can analyze it. Also, the 2 of us will be the bosses of this game. Other than the evil gods that have yet to be unsealed, we are the highest level. Do you want to try and defeat us here?" Alderman was about to attack when Manitra stopped him and shook his head. "It seems like no one is going to make a move. What a pity. The points you get from defeating us will allow you to advance to the next level even if you lose the faction quest," Carrie said regretfully. "All right, the game officially begins." With that, Carrie and Xiaohe turned around and left. "Let's go," Manette said. Audrin hesitated for a moment before finally following Manette's footsteps. There were also a few people who left in groups of 1 or 2. Of course, there were still a few people left at the scene. Audrin followed Manette. "Manette, why aren't you attacking? No matter how strong those 2 women are, They shouldn't be able to defeat 16 people. To be precise, 15 people. Also, didn't you see that woman send one person out? The one who was sent out should be eliminated, right? It's a special item that woman has. But if we had attacked, are you sure she wouldn't have used that item to eliminate us? Then why can't we stay here? Isn't it better to move together? Audrin asked. It's more dangerous when there are too many people. Although it's an RPG game, this game should also be a werewolf killing game. The traders are like werewolves, so there must be a prophet. Isn't it good to have a prophet? No, it's very bad. Audrin stared at Manet. You aren't a traitor, are you? Manet stretched out his hand and revealed a strange-looking bracelet. This is called Ring Sense. It's a prophecy magic item. When activated, it can detect the color of your underwear today. Of course, it also includes all your identity information. You're a prophet? Audrin looked at Manet in shock. That's right, but a prophet can't accurately know everyone's identity information. He needs to designate a suspect to perform the prophecy. Other than the target, all the players present can obtain the relevant identity information. The cooldown is 24 hours. In other words, it can only be used once a day. My prophecy magic item is already in cooldown. If we had stayed at the scene, the people present would have formed an alliance and started a werewolf killing in the wild. Other than wasting time, it would also cause chaos because everyone would be suspicious of each other at the start. The traders would deliberately release misleading information or even use words to force the prophet out. Then how do you know I'm not a traitor? Why do you think my ring sense is in cooldown? You've already used it on me? No. Since you've used it on me, doesn't that mean everyone else knows my identity? I used it in the hotel. What? You could use it at that time? This is a small trick. First, confirm the ally. I need a trustworthy partner, not a suspicious team. This is also one of the hidden rules of this game. You can't form a team with more than one person. A team made up of people who don't trust each other will only lead to faster elimination. But when there's danger, it's safer, isn't it? Perhaps, but there'll be more danger. The Evil God faction will definitely launch more and stronger attacks. We, who are alone, will be safer. At least the enemies we meet won't be the enemy's main force. Manet paused and then said, Also, what are the conditions to unlock the Evil God seal? What are the conditions to reseal the Evil God? What are the conditions to defeat the Evil God? We don't know, but I'm sure that these conditions are hidden among the players. They might be the main targets of the Evil God faction. Of course, it could also be a hidden item along the way. We need to explore all of this. Luckily, you're here. Otherwise, I really don't know what to do. Maybe I'll be eliminated. There's still too little information. We can't control the progress of the game. So, what we need to do now is explore the game. Chapter 3063. There are people in front. Orderon said, Should we go over? Let's go over and take a look. Manitou nodded. Orderon trusted Manitou's brain. Manitou was a frivolous person, but his brain was really good. The two of them walked in that direction. 3 minutes later, they saw a cave in front of them. There were a few people in uniform at the entrance of the cave. They seemed to be doing some work there. But to be able to appear in this area, they were definitely not ordinary people. They don't seem very strong, and they're not on our side. Should we attack? Don't attack yet. They don't look like combatants. Maybe they're the enemy's logistics. You hide here. I'll go up. If there's a conflict, you can sneak attack. Okay, got it. Manitou walked out of the bushes. When a few people saw Manitou, they didn't panic too much. They didn't show any hostility either. Henry glanced at Manitou. Someone found this place so quickly? Who are you? Manitou didn't let down his guard because of the other party's casualness. Don't be so nervous. We're not enemies. We're not on either side. We're in charge of setting up the scene, Henry said as he pointed at a wooden sign hanging at the top of the cave entrance. Dragon's Tomb. This wooden sign seemed to be newly hung, and it was still relatively new. Air. Manitou was speechless. So, they were logistics workers. Do we need to wait for you to finish setting up before we can go in? Manitou asked. You can go in now. The actors, no, the NPCs are in place. The scene is still being set up. If you want to go in, you can go in now. Manitou gestured to Orderon, who was in the bushes behind. Orderon walked out of the bushes. Manitou, what's going on? Manitou explained and said, this dragon's tomb should be a pocket dimension. Maybe there are some clues or items. The two of them entered the cave with the sign. Along the way, there were a few workers in uniforms going in and out. After entering the deepest part of the cave, the two of them were shocked by the scene before them. The interior of the cave was very large, and in the middle of it, there was a true giant dragon nesting. Most importantly, there were not only giant dragons in the cave, but also a few staff members who were decorating the scene. For example, placing some dragon bones in a corner or splashing some red liquid on the walls of the cave. One of the staff members stood in front of the dragon. Your Excellency Sabonis, have you memorized the script? All right, don't disturb my sleep. I've already memorized it, Sabonis said impatiently. Audra and Manet were in a bad mood. Was there a need to go so far? A real dragon actually came here to act as an NPC? Isn't this a little too extravagant? Hey, someone's coming. Seeing Audrey and Manette come in, the staff member said, please wait a moment. It'll be ready soon. Your Excellency Sabonis, the players are here. It's up to you now. Sabonis propped up his huge body. Under his body, Orderon and Manet's legs turned to jelly. Don't tell me you want us to fight him? You'll die, right? Mortals, you've trespassed into the forbidden area. Sabonis started and then forgot what to say. The staff member didn't leave. He was still not far away, waving his hands and looking very anxious. Please wait a moment. Sabonis took out a huge script. At least, it was huge for ordinary people. Then, he read from the script. Mortals, you've trespassed into the forbidden area of the dragon race. Give me a reason not to kill you. Manet and Orderon were speechless. Manet hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and cooperated with Sabonis' performance. Your Excellency Dragon, we didn't mean to offend you. We followed the guidance of fate and passed through this place. No matter what, you've already stepped into the forbidden area and disturbed our ancestors' eternal slumber. So, you now have two choices. Either you accept our ancestors' test, or you die here and accompany our ancestor for all eternity. May I ask what the test is? Both of their hearts were pounding. Please don't fight me. Even if you only use 1/10 or 1/100th of your strength, we'll still be trampled. We can't win. It's definitely impossible to win. What are your professions? Sabonis asked. I'm a hero. I'm a spellcaster. Both of them reported their professions. Then, let's start with you, hero. Sabonis pointed at Orderon with his dragon claw. Sabonis' dragon claw was even bigger than Orderon and Manet. So, are you ready? Orderon smiled bitterly. Ready for what? He didn't even know what the test was. In any case, if he were to fight a dragon, he definitely wouldn't be able to win. Even if he was 10 times stronger, he still wouldn't be able to win. Yes, I'm ready. Orderon nodded, although he had the intention to give up struggling. However, Aodalan was still on high alert. Suddenly, a terrifying aura erupted from Sabonis' body. Dragon's might? Orderon almost knelt on the ground. Such a terrifying pressure. He felt as if the entire world was pressing down on him. Even breathing became extremely difficult. Orderon's body was on the verge of collapse, as if he would fall the next moment. But Orderon still held on. His feet seemed to be rooted to the ground, barely maintaining his balance. Suddenly, Orderon's body felt light. All the dragon aura disappeared. Orderon almost fell to the ground. Very good. You passed the test. Your courage has been recognized by the ancestors. The ancestors are willing to bless you. You can choose one of your hero equipment to receive the blessing of the dragon ancestor. I passed just like that? Orderon was in disbelief, although he had the intention to give up a few times. But when Sabonis said that he passed the test and even received a reward, Orderon still couldn't believe it. Orderon was still in disbelief. After all, he was facing a real WIRM. What else? Do you want to fight me to pass the test? Although that's what my script says, if you want to fight me to be satisfied, I'll be happy to accompany you. No. I didn't mean that. Orderon hurriedly waved his hand. What do you need me to do to receive the blessing of the dragon ancestor? Just go through the motions. I don't have any special requirements. Anyway, hero's sword, hero's armor, hero's hand, and hero's foot. You can just go there and soak in dragon blood. That'll be the blessing. Orderon smiled bitterly. Although this was a big deal, the details were still very rough. Sabonis looked at Manet. Now it's your turn. Manet smiled bitterly and took a few steps forward. Willpower isn't my strong point. Can I give up? You're a spellcaster. The test is different. Huh? Different? Okay, cast a spell now. Any spell is fine. As long as you can cast it, you pass. Chapter 3064. Manet had thought that he was being taken care of, but just as he was about to use magic, he suddenly felt the spirit of heaven and earth being stirred up. Manet realized that Sabonis was stirring up the spirit of heaven and earth. For most spiritualists, this was a pseudo-magic forbidding field. Trying to cast magic in this environment. It was as troublesome as fetching a glass of water in muddy water. Manet's expression was ugly. He could only lower the level of his spells. But even the most basic elemental fireball was extremely difficult. Manet was also secretly anxious. What should he do? Manet saw the disappointment and mockery in Sabonis' eyes. Suddenly, Manet thought of an idea. A very dangerous idea. Absorb the chaotic spirit of heaven and earth into his body. He might be injured before the spell was fully unleashed. Absorb the chaotic spirit of heaven and earth into his body, and then refine it a second time. But Manet had estimated that if he used the lowest level of magic, it would be impossible for him to do so. He would be injured, but he wouldn't die. Manet decided to take the risk. The game had just started. It would be embarrassing if he was eliminated. Of course, there was another more important reason. Manet came from a small family. There were only 2 or 3 kids and pitifully few resources. The so-called small family was actually just 3 households with a dozen people. How scarce were resources? For a low-level magic tool, 3 generations of 3 households had schemed against each other for more than a decade. From his grandfather's generation to his cousins of this generation. All sorts of plots and schemes had been used just to get this magic tool. Manet's family was the one that had failed. And as compensation, he got a spot in the supernatural youth fighting competition. He had thought that this was a useless competition. But after participating in this competition, he realized that his standards were too low. Not to mention the organizers, just the other participants. There were all sorts of magic tools that were much more powerful than a magic tool in his family. As for the organizers, the supernatural organization, their generosity was even more shocking. And Manet got some uncertain information from the grapevine. A few eliminated contestants had joined the supernatural organization. Every time Manet said that he was going out to play, his main purpose wasn't to eat, drink, and have fun, but to find out some information. He confirmed the authenticity of this information. He also found out that one of the siblings was favored by the supernatural organization. Their names were Disser and Sildia. This pair of brother and sister were very weak. At the very least, most of the participants were not weaker than them, but they were favored by the supernatural organization. This meant that the supernatural organization wasn't interested in their power. Come to think of it, it made sense. As long as he joined them, he would definitely be able to obtain resources that far exceeded that of a small family. Therefore, the current level of strength was insignificant. Either they were chosen by the supernatural organization, or they had shown potential to attract the supernatural organization. Either that, or they had special skills and abilities. So Manet also wanted to become a member of the supernatural organization. In that case, he didn't just have to display his strength. In fact, the main task was not to display his strength. Instead, he wanted to display his potential and abilities. This was also the reason why he teamed up with A.O. DeLuin and not the rest of the team. If there were more people, it would be less conspicuous. In the case of a 2-person team, the individual performance opportunities were highlighted. Moreover, in the case of a large group, there were many times when they couldn't control themselves. That was why Manet didn't want to fall at this moment. The supernatural organization had already displayed a shocking amount of power. The first trial might seem ordinary, but that time, the Watcher was extremely powerful. As for the game this time, it was called a game. But it was an extraordinary game. After all, In this world, a force that could organize and arrange such a realistic RPG game was not a simple force. As for entering the government department, Manet didn't even think about it. Eaglehound sounded like a big name and seemed to have great power. But in reality, they were the police of the spiritual world. They worked like a cow, received a dog's salary, and faced dangerous situations. So no matter how he thought about it, the supernatural organization was the most suitable for his goal. They had power, and enough capital, and the environment to grow up in. These were all things he dreamed of. Sabonis' eyes lit up. Manet's aura changed. Manet had no secrets in Sabonis' eyes. The difference in power and level. This allowed Sabonis to see through Manet at a glance. Magnet's palm began to glow red, and a small but stable fireball appeared in front of Sabonis. Manet pushed, and the small fireball smashed into Sabonis' face. But this small fireball didn't even burn a single scale. The next moment, Manet spat out blood. His face was much weaker. "Not bad, little guy. You passed the test too," Sabonis said. Sabonis said, "I think highly of you. I see wisdom in you. Now, you can also receive the same reward." Sabonis paused and said, "At the same time, you will also receive a piece of information. Head to Death Canyon. There's a witch cursed by death there. She was an adventurer from 1,000 years ago. She and her teammates defeated the evil god, but she was also cursed by the evil god. She has been looking for a new generation of adventurers who can inherit her power. Maybe you're the people she is looking for." "Respected dragon, can you tell us who are the people who want to break the evil god's seal?" "It's, hey, Sir Sabonis, you can't say that." The staff beside him quickly stopped him. "All right," Sabonis shrugged. "This is also part of the game. You can decipher yourself. Actually, I don't like my current character. Boss should have arranged another identity for me, like the final boss or something. At least let me be a battle type. It's rare for me to come out of play, but he made me stay here. All right, open a magic map now. The dragon's necropolis is already marked on the map. In the bottom right corner of the necropolis is Death Canyon." Sabonis looked at the staff again. "I didn't break the game, did I?" "In principle, you can't say it. They have to explore it themselves, but forget it." The staff was helpless too. He had already said it. What else could he do? After enhancing their equipment, Manet and Orderon hurried to Death Canyon. Not long after they left the necropolis, they saw a battle ahead. Chapter 3065. One side of the battle was the main force. The other side was the evil spirit emitting a cold aura. Spirit bodies that could go shopping during the day were basically not ordinary spirit bodies. It was afternoon and the sun was high in the sky. It was the time when the yang energy was at its strongest. It was almost June and the weather was getting hotter. But the evil spirit wasn't affected at all. It was facing 7 spiritualists alone and had the upper hand. Not only was it unaffected, but the surrounding environment had also turned cold. The trees and flowers were covered in a layer of frost. "Can't you fucking do something? I can't keep acting anymore," Pamela said unhappily. "You can't get close to me. Can't you attack from afar?" Outside, Manet and Orderon were speechless. The players were even more embarrassed. They wanted it too, but they really couldn't beat it. Even though the spirit was floating in place, their magic power seemed to be frozen. What exactly was this spirit? They had never heard of such a cruel spell. She seemed to be surrounded by an indescribable sense of oppression. Even magic power was frozen. What kind of terrifying power was this? They could retreat far away and attack from afar. But this circle was at least 20 meters wide. How could they attack from 20 meters away? Pamela thought that she had a good temper. But facing these rookies, she couldn't control her emotions and flew into a rage. "What's wrong with you? When you saw me, didn't you put a shield on yourself and hide far away? Now you can't even retreat. I really have to give it to you." Pamela shook her head. "Forget it, stupid mortals. You're so weak and useless. Sacrifice a soul now." The group of 7 looked at each other. No one wanted to be sacrificed. Just then, a woman pointed at a teammate. "I choose him." With this woman as the starting point, and she seemed to have some authority in the team, the others all pointed at that teammate. "No, you can't do this. You don't have the right to sacrifice me. How can you? The person shouted agitatedly, but no one cared about his will. Then it's up to you. Pamela spat out a breath of cold air at the man. In an instant, the man was frozen into a block of ice. Okay, you can leave now. Pamela retracted her cold aura. That group of people didn't look good. They hadn't gotten anything from Pamela, and they'd lost a person. Just then, Pamela looked at the bushes to the side. It was where Manet and Audrin were hiding. Do you two want to accept my test? The remaining 6 people were surprised. There was someone else beside them. Seeing that their cover had been blown, Manet and Audrin could only walk out. Originally, they had planned to come out after those people left. But now they had no choice but to come out. Those 6 people knew Manet and Orderon. After all, there were only 16 contestants left. Even if they were not familiar with each other, they would at least have a common sight. Moreover, after a few consecutive matches, everyone knew each other well. Honorable Madam, we know our own strength. We are no match for you. Manet and Audrin knew that this female spirit was also an actor. Moreover, judging from the strength she had displayed just now, it was impossible for her to escape. It was definitely not to be underestimated. They didn't even see her attack, but she'd already suppressed the 7. The strength of the 2 of them was not necessarily stronger than that of the 7 opponents. Therefore, if they were to fight, they would definitely not be able to defeat this spirit body. The difference was too obvious. They had no chance of winning. I won't attack you directly, nor will I use defensive skills. As long as you can use physical or magical attacks to break through my defense, you pass the test. The time limit is 10 minutes. If you succeed, you'll obtain a powerful and loyal spirit servant. This spirit servant can help you fight and also provide you with unexpected information. What if you fail? One of you will be sacrificed to me, just like that guy. Pamela pointed at the unlucky guy she had frozen not far away. They'd seen Pamela's test from the side. Manet was a bit hesitant. Pamela had said it lightly. She didn't use offensive or defensive skills. She just stood there and let them attack. As long as any of their attacks could touch Pamela, they would pass. But was it really that easy? Manet was about to refuse, but Orderon said loudly, "Okay, we accept. I'll wait." "Orderon, you're too impulsive," Manet grumbled. To be honest, he didn't want to accept this test. It might be more difficult than Sabonis' test in the Dragon's Tomb. "It's okay," Orderon said. "If you fail, I'll be the sacrifice." "Then are you ready?" Pamela asked. "Wait, let's pull away first." Manet hurriedly pulled Orderon and ran. "No." Orderon shook off Manet's hand. "Manet, you know I'm an enhancer. It's not good for me to run too far. Didn't you see what happened to those people? If you go near that lady, you'll probably be frozen into ice." "I'm not afraid." Manet smiled bitterly. It wasn't a matter of whether he was afraid or not. Forget it. Manet ran 20 meters away by himself. On the other hand, Ao de Luynes stood about 10 meters away. Suddenly, a terrifying cold current exploded from Pamela's body again. Manet stood 20 meters away, even though he could feel the cold air blowing against his face. He also felt the cold current, but it didn't affect him much. As for Ao de Luynes, who was standing about 10 meters away, he was having a hard time moving. Manet was shocked. Just now, he had sensed Pamela's power, but didn't think much of it. But now that he was facing her, he realized it wasn't like that at all. This spirit wasn't any weaker than Sabonis. The cold current had a faintly discernible and terrifying aura. It all meant that she wasn't an ordinary spirit. Standing in front, Orderon felt it even more strongly. "Manet, stand behind me." Manet immediately understood Orderon's intention. He wasn't stupid. He actually had such an idea. Orderon wanted to block the cold current himself and let Manet attack. Chapter 3066. Audrin was very strong. His body was already covered in frost, but Audrin still forced himself to move forward. Manet threw a fireball to test it out. The fireball was extinguished by the cold air halfway. Although Audrin had blocked most of the cold air, it was still very cold. Even so, the remaining cold air was still bone-chilling. "Manet, hit me with your explosive fire." Audrin, Don't go crazy. Manet was anxious too. Audrin was in front because he believed in his abilities. He also wanted to finish this as soon as possible. But Pamela's abilities still made them feel despair. Hurry, Manet. My body is going to freeze. Manet looked at Audrin's back. He suddenly felt that he was very tall. Manet looked at Pamela and made up his mind. He quickly brewed an explosive fire in his hand. Manet locked onto Audrin's back and shouted, "I'm coming, watch out." Manet threw the explosive fire at Audrin. The explosive fire had been weakened by half by the cold air during its flight. Right now, Audrin's body was almost frozen. The moment the explosive fire hit him, flames engulfed Audrin. But the next moment, the flames were quickly extinguished by the cold air. In that instant of explosion, the ice on Audrin's body shattered. Not only was Audrin not injured, but he also used this opportunity to break free. Seizing the chance, Audrin suddenly charged forward 2 steps. However, even these 2 steps were extremely precious to him. Audrin could not take another step. Again, use a stronger fire spell. Pamela's lips curled into a smile. The cold air was slightly weaker. Manet's performance was above average, and Audrin's performance was extraordinary. Manet remained to be seen. Just this performance alone was enough for him to stand out in the eyes of the observers behind the scenes. So, there was a high chance that Audrin would become her colleague. Of course, even if he entered the supernatural organization, he would most likely be an outer member. After all, he was still too weak and didn't have many special characteristics. In fact, the bosses in charge of the level had another identity. That was the hidden judge. Besides them, there was another group of people watching in front of the screen. This guy's not bad. He has some battlefield intelligence, Jalanash said. What's his name again? A.O. DeLuin. Gaius said, it's a pity that his personality overlaps with mine. Otherwise, he would be a very good teammate when he grows up. You can join our team, Moyle said. At least half a year later. He's still too weak, an elite said. Holmes Davis and Nina stood behind the crowd. Neither of them dared to speak. They were both newcomers, and they were only outer members. Apart from the 2 of them, everyone else was an official member. To them, they were all big shots. However, they were still lucky, although he was an outer member. However, their talents and compatibility were not bad. Therefore, it had already been reserved by Gaia and Elite. So now they had the honor of being the audience. Captain Gaia, those people over there seem to have quite a bit of strength. At the very least, they're not inferior to these 2, Nina said. No, their brains aren't good. Gaia shook his head. Not only do they have no special characteristics, they don't know how to cooperate. In the end, they even forcefully sacrificed one person. If one of them didn't vote, I could have brought that person into the supernatural organization, but none of them refused to vote. These people will definitely not enter the supernatural organization. That wasn't teamwork. That was betrayal. No one would like such people, no matter how strong or talented they were. The supernatural organization wouldn't want them. And no team would want people who would sacrifice one person for everyone's safety in times of danger. That Manet isn't bad, too. Reiko, I think he's suitable for your team. Don't ask me, Nagasaka Reiko said. I can't make the decision without the captain. Nagasaka Reiko was in Hallie's team. Because Hallie's had a performance mission, Nagasaka Reiko was in charge of supervising the selection of reserve members. Every team would either have their captain or their team members here. It was mainly to select reserve members for each team. He's strong and smart, an elite said. He can calmly analyze the situation in a situation like this and react calmly. He's above average, but his perception is weak. Didn't he notice that Pamela's power has weakened? He can walk forward a few meters and close the distance between him and Pamela. His magic should be from a small family, Jalanash said. It's not easy for him to reach this level. Do you expect him to learn anything else? Also, the smaller families basically give up on perceptual spells. They focus more on offensive spells, Jalanash said. That Manet also used elemental magic, and he knew all 4 elements. He was on the same path as Jalanash. But the difference in power between the 2 was like heaven and earth. Jalanash's perception had been quite weak back then. Even if an evil spirit was circling behind her, she might not be able to detect it. It wasn't until last year, when her power reached a bottleneck, that she started studying perception spells. She used it to make up for her shortcomings in battle. Plus, she came from a small family, so she could understand Manet. She saw her reflection in Manet. "Count him in. He'll join my team. I'll lead him," Jalanash said. Back at the scene, Manet and Orderon finally passed Pamela's test. Of course, that was if Pamela secretly went easy on him. It couldn't be helped. If Pamela really gave them a hard time, all the players together wouldn't be able to pass. As for whether they gave them a hard time or not, it depended on Pamela's impression of them. For example, the group of players not far away. Pamela's impression of them couldn't be worse. The 6 people standing in the distance all didn't look good. The woman in the lead's face was as cold as ice. "Aluntarai, they passed." "Shut up. I have eyes," Aluntarai said coldly. Aluntarai said coldly, "They're just stepping on us." If we didn't find out that spirit's ability first, the 2 of them wouldn't have ended up any better than us. So we're just going to let them go? Let them take all the benefits? "Wait, let's follow them," Aluntarai said softly. Aluntarai said softly, "I want them to know that it's not that easy to take advantage of me." Chapter 3067. Manet and Orderon hurriedly left after receiving the rewards. They obviously saw the malicious gazes of Aluntarai and the others in the distance. They also wanted to keep a low profile, but it was hard for them to back down now. The 2 of them quickly left the scene. They knew that someone was chasing them. They didn't dare to stay any longer. But it wasn't like they had no chance of winning. The rewards they had just received were quite tempting. While running, Orderon said, "Manet, we might not be weaker than them now. Why should we run?" That's right. The 2 rewards had made Orderon and Manet's strength soar. Orderon was even a little giddy. In the spiritual world, 1 + 1 wasn't equal to 2. The effect of increasing strength wasn't as simple as adding or subtracting. "Orderon, you're wrong. We're avoiding them not because there's a difference in strength between us and them." Manet shook his head and said, "First of all, we have to ensure the faction's victory. That's the biggest prerequisite. This game isn't as simple as a game. I believe that any of our choices will affect our final judgment. If we make sacrifices for the sake of victory, as long as there's value, individual sacrifices are acceptable. That's why we need to avoid infighting. I don't know if there's a spy among the group that's chasing us, but I'm sure that most of them are from our faction. That's why if we fight them, no matter who wins or loses, the Justice faction will suffer in the end. And to clear this game, we definitely can't just rely on you and me. So we have to avoid battles that need to be avoided. Also, this is for our own protection. If we fight them, no matter who wins or loses, it's very likely that the spy will benefit from it. Right now, we can't confirm who the spy is, so we have to avoid contact with other players as much as possible. At this moment, Manet took out a small bottle and injected a bit of mana into it. A spirit emerged from the bottle. "Master, I'm your servant, Malari. I'm not a combat-type spirit. My character is an observer spirit. What can I do for you?" Manet wasn't disappointed that his spirit wasn't a combat type. On the contrary, his rationality told him that in this situation, Malari's ability was more practical. "Is there any way to get rid of those people behind us?" "Master, I can provide a few routes or some suggestions, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to shake off the pursuers behind me." "What kind of advice?" "First, head to the various trial regions. There are some strong existences in those regions. If they are from the Order faction, they're not allowed to use force in those regions. Otherwise, they will be lured to the opposing faction's region. You can provide us with the locations of all the areas?" Manet asked in surprise. Their current magic map only showed the areas that they had been to, and the areas that they had not been to were just shadows. "No, I'm like a regional map. If there's a special area within 10 square kilometers, I can tell you," Marali said. "In addition, I can tell you the location, movement, and speed of all living creatures within a kilometer radius." "Are there any special areas within your perception range?" "Yes, there's a dark spirit swamp on the left in front of us. There are a large number of aggressive spirits in that swamp. Can order an ideal with the spirit in the dark spirit swamp? If it's an ordinary spirit in the dark spirit swamp, it's fine. However, there are some special spirits in the dark spirit swamp that are very powerful. In addition, if you defeat the special spirit, you can fuse with me to improve my characteristics or develop other abilities. Ordern looked surprised and asked, as long as there's a supporting spirit, it's possible, right? Yes. Marali nodded. Is the spirit in the dark spirit swamp an actor like you? Manit asked. No, those spirits can be destroyed. As for the so-called fusion in the setting, it's actually for me to show more of my strength. If you defeat a powerful spirit, I'll show more of my strength. Anyway, that's the game's setting. All right. Manit smiled bitterly. He had thought that Marali was an ordinary spirit, but it turned out that he was also very powerful. From the intelligence he displayed, he could tell that he was not ordinary. Ordern took out the small bottle that contained the supporting spirit and also injected magic power to summon his own supporting spirit. Doris at your service. I'm a combat-type spirit. Doris was a female spirit body, and her body was also cold. It felt like she was the same as the previous terrifying spirit body, but Doris was obviously not as strong as the previous spirit body. Doris, you said the wrong line, Marali reminded. Whatever, don't mind it, Doris said disapprovingly. Her character was obviously more casual, while Malali was more old-fashioned. Doris said that because I'm a combat type for the game's balance, I can only use 1/10 of my power. Also, I can only fight for you for 5 minutes. There's a time limit? Ordern suddenly looked like he was about to cry. I can't help it. I calculated it based on the level of your magic power. If I'm your spirit or the spirit you control, your magic power can only sustain me for 5 minutes at most, and that's under the premise that my power is suppressed. If I go all out, you'll instantly turn into a dried corpse. Manit rolled his eyes. If you devour the spirit in the dark spirit swamp, you can fight longer and increase your power, right? Yes. Doris nodded. Marali, the people following us are still behind us, right? Yes, but they don't plan to make a move for now. Is there a way to hide our tracks? My main function is detection and perception. Hiding isn't part of my ability settings. Manit was helpless. He could tell that it wasn't that Marali couldn't do it, but he couldn't. Let's speed up. I can cast Speed of the Cold Wind on you, Doris said. Speed of the Cold Wind? Aren't you a combat type? Although I'm a combat type, I can still use it, Doris replied. Speed of the Cold Wind can increase movement speed, and it can also be used in battle. Ordern and Manit couldn't help but sigh. Having such a supporting spirit was really too convenient and practical. Chapter 3068. They suddenly sped up. Quick, let's pick up the pace, Alundarai ordered. However, the more they chased, the further they were left behind. Unless they all used their mana and used acceleration spells. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to catch up to them. If they used acceleration spells now, it would mean that they were damaging their own mana. Every bit of their magic power was very precious, and they couldn't just squander it here. Even if they used acceleration spells, they would only use them during the battle, not when they were on the road. Therefore, the end result was that they were left behind. In the end, they completely lost track of them. They knew that the two in front must have used acceleration spells. However, they didn't have the courage to do so. Maintaining acceleration spells for such a long time would only result in one of them running out of mana. It was indeed a strategic value to chase after them now. However, they needed at least 2 people to use acceleration spells to maintain their speed. However, who would be willing to choose 2 out of 6 people to run out of mana? Everyone was in an alliance, not a superior and subordinate relationship. Sacrificing one before it already caused their relationship to become strained. No one would be willing to sacrifice themselves at this moment. Everyone stopped. They didn't look too good. Those 2 must be from the evil faction, Aluntarai said while clenching her teeth. Maybe they didn't team up with us. It doesn't mean they are from the evil faction. Aluntarai frowned and looked at the player who disagreed with her. Gru, what do you mean by this? Don't tell me you're with them? I think you are, Gru retorted without fear. I noticed that you have been inciting infighting since we started working together. You even assumed the role of the leader. We never agreed for you to be the leader, but as the leader, you didn't do anything. Instead, you put us all in danger. The spy couldn't wait anymore and jumped out to frame us. Alunrai looked at Gru with a cold smile. I believe we have a prophet in our team. Maybe we should let the prophet check on our Mr. Gru. This kind of blatant framing is not something a player of the righteous faction should do. One had to admit that although Alunrai made a few mistakes, they weren't intentional. On the contrary, Galu's words made them vigilant. His blatant accusation was too direct. At the same time, it also made people feel that Gru's purpose was too strong. Even if Gru had been a little more tactful, he wouldn't have been so repulsed. I am the prophet, Gelu snorted coldly. So you don't have to provoke us. Alunrai looked at Gru calmly. Prove it to all of us. You said that I'm from the evil alignment, so I have to doubt your purpose. Gru took out a very thick magic book. This is the Book of Perception. It can sense people from the evil alignment, but it has a 24-hour cooldown. Then come at me. Prove my innocence and prove what you said, Alunrai said firmly as she stood in front of Gru. Do you think I'll back down just because you said that? Gru injected magic power into the Book of Perception. In an instant, the Book of Perception started flipping. Finally, the Book of Perception stopped flipping. At the same time, a light screen jumped out from the pages of the book. Identity card, Assassin, hides in the dark. Every attack you make from the back has a 50% damage bonus. Identity card, Leader. Under your leadership, your teammates will have a 10% magic bonus. Identity card, Fated Messenger. You are the one destined to be. You will receive 50% more rewards than others in all areas. Identity card, Nature's Guardian. You repair areas that are not natural and destroy unnatural creatures. You will receive rewards that no one else has. The remaining 4 all saw Alunrai's information. None of the 4 cards belonged to the evil alignment. Gru's expression was a little unnatural. Alunrai's expression was even worse. All right, you've wasted a skill, and I've proven my identity. But you've exposed both of our identities at the same time. Are you satisfied now? Not only did they fail to find the spy from the evil alignment, they even blew themselves up. There were 6 people in the team, so there was a high chance that there was a spy among them. This meant that both of them were exposed to the spy's eyes. They would also become the spy's targets. Alunrai's identity as the leader and Gru's identity as the prophet. Both of them posed a great threat to the spy. Therefore, they would definitely become the spy's targets. The other 4 all had different expressions. However, judging from their expressions, it was almost impossible to tell who they were. Gru was a bit embarrassed. He swore that Alunrai was the spy of the evil alignment, but it turned out that she wasn't. Not to mention that she was a natural leader. In other words, she was the undisputed leader of the team. Now, not only did he blow himself up, he also exposed Alunrai's identity as the leader. This was very awkward. Actually, this is fine, isn't it? One of the team members stepped forward and said, at least your identities are clear. As long as we stick to Alunrai and stick together with her, and don't go against her on the general direction, the spy of the evil alignment won't be able to do anything, right? They can't just blow themselves up in front of everyone, right? That's right, the game has only just begun, and Gru's identity as the prophet has been confirmed. If we use prophecy once a day, we'll definitely be able to find the spy. I'm just afraid that the spy might have some special methods that could put me and Gru in danger. I'm fine, at least my profession gives me great survivability, but I'm not so sure about Gru Alunrai. I'm sorry, I was too reckless before. I apologize. Gru wasn't really willing to apologize to Alunrai. However, he had no other choice at the moment. He needed to stick together with Alunrai. Alunrai's identity as the leader could protect him to a certain extent. Plus her profession, not only was she good at self-defense, she was also very good at tracking and anti-tracking. On top of that, Alunrai was the only one he could trust at the moment. At least before his prophecy cooled down, he could only stick together with Alunrai. I accept your apology, Whether Aluntarai had truly forgiven Gru or not, she had to stick together with Gru. Because the two of them were the ones whose identities were confirmed. Not to mention excluding the others, at least the two of them had to stick together. Forget it. Since we've lost track of those two, let's stop tracking them. We'll just play the game at our own pace. Aluntarai's words were no longer objecting. Chapter 3069. That night, Aluntarai found a cave, and the six of them spent the night in it. The first day passed just like that. There were some small troubles during the day. However, they did not encounter any real battles. Of course, they also became more familiar with the nature of the game. In the evening, an unexpected enemy showed up and forced them to fight. It was a moderate victory. Then, just like in the game, they obtained some equipment. This gave the Chi warriors, who were originally in a weakened state, a shot in the arm. Midnight. Suddenly, they heard someone yelling. They all opened their eyes in annoyance. They realized that it was their teammates who were on night watch. Get up! Get up! The teammates yelled. They were all impatient. What are you doing? Why are you not sleeping in the middle of the night? Aluntarai stood up and asked with a frown, What's going on? There's danger. I feel danger. The teammate on night watch said. What? You called us because you sense danger? Are you crazy? Shut up, all of you. Aluntarai scolded and turned to the teammates. You said you sense danger? Instead of being in danger? Captain, my first identity is a boxer, and my second profession is an explorer. Explorers have danger sense. My explorer's exclusive tool just warned us that danger is approaching. Get up, all of you. Aluntarai yelled. If you don't want to get up or keep complaining, get out of the team. Now. Although the teammates were not happy about it, they still got up. What else did you sense? It's not humans. It should be monsters. I'm not sure how many of them there are, but their danger sense is quite strong. In other words, there is a certain level of danger, but we should be able to handle it. Aluntarai nodded. Everyone, get ready for battle. Soon, a large group of monsters appeared outside the cave. Their pupils were especially obvious under the night sky. Soon, the monsters showed up. There was no communication. It was just a fight. The scene was extremely chaotic. They were competitors after all, and they did not know each other for long. Therefore, they did not cooperate during the fight. They attacked wherever they went. Occasionally, one or two tried to cooperate. The result was that they interfered with each other. Don't force yourself to cooperate. Aluntarai said, Keep some distance from each other in case the spies try to assassinate you. Gru unconsciously moved closer to Aluntarai. Aluntarai's words reminded him of something. Apart from Aluntarai, everyone else was unreliable. Suddenly, Groucho froze. Gru, don't just stand there. This is a battlefield, not a place for you to daydream. Aluntarai yelled in dissatisfaction. Gru, did you hear that? Gru looked at Aluntarai with a bitter face. I'm dead. What? I'm out. I'm dead. Aluntarai didn't understand, and neither did the others. At this moment, a light shone from Gulu's body, binding Gulu. At the same time, this light also protected him from the attacks of the surrounding magical beasts. The battle lasted for an hour. They finally killed or chased away all the magical beasts. There were many spoils of war, more than what they had obtained in the battle yesterday evening. But no one was happy. Because Gru was dead, Gru was still rooted to the spot. Gru, what's going on? Why are you out? Who killed you? Aluntarai looked at Gru seriously. The others were also worried, because Gru's elimination was definitely not the work of the magical beasts. Because the magical beasts didn't even test him. Of course, they weren't sure how Gru died. Gru didn't have any magical beasts with him, but he didn't have any other teammates either. Gru died mysteriously in an empty field. I don't know either. I didn't feel any attacks, and all my equipment stopped working. At the same time, I also received a notification that I was fatally wounded. I'm dead, Gru said helplessly. How is that possible? Did it malfunction somewhere? I don't know. Gru didn't know either. You were fatally wounded, so you should know where you were wounded, right? Aluntarai asked. I don't know. Gru still gave the same answer. Can you give me any useful clues, or not? Aluntarai's annoyed tone revealed her dissatisfaction. I don't fucking know what's going on either. Gru also cursed. I'm out, what can I say? He was more depressed than anyone else right now. He wanted to seek Alunarai's protection, but in the end, he died mysteriously. The spy of the evil faction has a killing technique that we don't know about. If the spy really had such a killing technique, he would have done it a long time ago. Why wait until now? Maybe this killing technique requires special conditions, or the cooldown is too long, or maybe this technique has a certain success rate. If it fails, he would have exposed himself. Aluntarai frowned and glanced at everyone in the field. Was there anyone standing behind Gru just now? The scene was a little chaotic just now. I only know that no one was near Gru, but I don't know if there was anyone behind him. Everyone was either guessing or reminiscing about the past. However, no one had any solid evidence. The only person who could be cleared of suspicion was Aluntarai. Gru was trying to get close to Aluntarai to seek protection. Everyone could see Gru's intentions and actions. Gru had even personally verified Alunarai's identity during the day. The Night Watcher Karita could also be cleared as a suspect. If he didn't remind everyone earlier, they would probably still be asleep. When the demons arrived, they might not be completely wiped out, but at least they would have lost more people. Therefore, Karita could barely be cleared as a suspect. However, someone stood up at this moment. Karita is suspicious. What? You're saying I'm suspicious? Karita was furious. What do you think I'm suspicious of? Maybe Gru wasn't knocked out by a magic attack. He was cursed or poisoned, maybe while he was sleeping. Karita was a night watcher at the time, so he's the most likely suspect. Even Gru looked doubtful at this moment. Aluntarai waved her hand. Do you think we were all asleep? No one could sleep soundly in such an environment. If Karita did anything wrong, more than 3 people would have jumped up. So, your speculation is too far-fetched. Chapter 3070. With Alunarai's guarantee, the others let go of their suspicions about Karita. However, everyone was in danger. Gru was then dragged out of the forest by the light that bound him. Only 5 people were left, and none of them felt sleepy. Only when the sun rose did they regain their spirits. After all, this was a game. They couldn't really die, although they were a bit too immersed in the game. But they wouldn't really feel like they were going to die. One of the team members caught a rabbit and roasted it, distributing it to the others. They also brought their own food. Before the game started, everyone had brought some food, because the organizers didn't forbid them from bringing their own food. As long as they brought enough, they could bring the supermarket over. However, they brought more compressed food with them. It could fill their stomachs, but the texture couldn't be guaranteed. A roasted rabbit was still able to bring them a sense of satisfaction. Fortunately, the wild rabbits in the mountains were extremely large. The 5 of them divided it, but not all of them were full. At least it was enough to satisfy them. However, after they finished eating, they packed their bags and were about to leave. Karita's body suddenly emitted light. It was the same light as Gru's body. What's going on? What's going on? Everyone looked at Gulu in shock. I'm out. Karita was also shocked. There's something wrong with the roasted rabbit. Everyone looked at Ponder, who was also in charge of roasting the rabbit. It's not me, it's not me. Ponder waved his hands in panic, wanting to say something to prove his innocence. It's not his problem, Aluntarai said. All of us have eaten the roasted rabbit. If there's really something wrong with the roasted rabbit, there's no reason for Karita to be the only one to be eliminated. Also, before you ate the roasted rabbit, you all used your own methods to check if there's anything wrong with it. Did Karita check it too? Maybe it's something we couldn't check? Or maybe he only tampered with one of the roasted meat to cover it up. Aluntarai shook her head. Although I don't have concrete evidence, I believe in Ponder. After all, it's too obvious, isn't it? Also, we don't even have evidence to accuse Ponder. That's too arbitrary. Everyone fell into deep thought, but someone still objected. Don't you guys think there's something wrong with Aluntarai? Every time someone had a problem, she would absolve that person, and that person would be eliminated. Aluntarai didn't explain, and the others looked at the man in doubt. Solely, no matter if Aluntarai's explanation is reasonable or not, her identity is confirmed. But I feel like you're purposely trying to smear her name. The others had the same thought. Aluntarai was definitely doing this for the sake of the team. Sali's words seemed like he was trying to stir up conflict and drag Alunnerai down with him. After all, it was too abnormal to drag a person whose identity had already been confirmed into the water. At this moment, the blonde woman appeared behind Soli without any warning. At the same time, a rope appeared in her hand and tied Soli up. "Feather, what are you doing?" Soli shouted. "Soli, you are very suspicious," Feather said. "In this situation, if there's a spy from the evil faction among us, I can only assume that it is you." "I think it is spy. I'm just raising a normal suspicion," Soli said. "But you took the chance to attack me. I think you're purposely using this chance to kick me out. You're the spy, aren't you?" "As I thought, you're the spy. Even now, you're still pointing your finger at me. Your goal is to muddy the water, isn't it?" Then, Feather was about to kill Soli. "Stop." A large hand grabbed Feather's wrist. Lumbo, the only black man in the team, stopped Feather. "Lumbo, you want to stop me too? We haven't figured anything out yet, but you're already in a hurry to kick him out. I can't help but suspect your motive." "What he said is obvious enough," Ponder said. "That's why I think Feather made the right choice. The safest thing to do now is to kick Soli out." "You're also a suspect," Lumbo said. "You're with Soli, right?" Ponder looked at Lumbo. "I noticed that you're the same as Soli. You both like to muddy the water. Aren't you also casually trying to climb up to me and criticize me?" Both sides couldn't convince the other, and both of them thought the other was a suspect. The battle began without any suspense. Both sides exchanged blows, each displaying their strengths. The first to be eliminated was Soli, then Feather, followed by Lumbo. Finally, only Ponder was left. There was also Alunnerai, who didn't participate in the battle. Ponder sat on the ground, panting heavily. Then Alunnerai walked in front of Ponder. She lightly tapped the back of Ponder's neck with her dagger. The elimination light on Ponder's body flashed. "Alunnerai, why did you do it to me? I'm not a spy." "I know. I'm a spy," Alunnerai said calmly. "What? How is that possible? How can you be a spy? This isn't right." Even until now, Ponder still didn't want to believe Alunnerai. "Nothing's wrong. Everything went smoothly," Alunnerai said calmly. "A spy's skill deception. It can change the information on my ID card. Even the prophecy of the prophet can be deceived. However, the effect can only last for 1 minute. In other words, if Gru was a minute late, I would have been exposed." "Damn it. How can you keep such a skill? This is against the rules," Ponder shouted unwillingly. Although this deception effect can only last for 1 minute, it has a 24-hour cooldown. At the same time, in the next 24 hours, all my abilities will be reduced by half. If you had observed carefully during the few battles, you would have noticed that I haven't been able to display my true strength. Then how did Gru and Karita get eliminated? When did you make your move on them? Not only did I deceive you about my identity as a spy, I also deceived you about my identity as a leader. I'm not a leader, but a king. As long as a player's trust in me exceeds 40 points and is within 5 meters of me, I have the authority to make a ruling on that player. I can bestow an ability enhancement to that player or have a 40% chance of ruling him out of the game. The first one is Gru. His trust in me exceeds 100 points, so I have a 100% success rate when I use a ruling on him. The second one is Chiruda. His trust in me exceeds 45 points, so the success rate is also 45%. If the ruling fails, then my identity will be exposed. I have to say, sending Chiruda out of the game is too risky. However, the effect is very good. From the results, this risk is very worth it. Chapter 3071. How can there be such a bug skill? This isn't fair. This isn't fair. Ponder shouted unwillingly, as if he was complaining about the unfairness of the world. Idiot, you have no idea that all of our class traits are related to our own magic traits and identity traits. Some of the skills of our class traits are related to magic in real life. In other words, as players, you and I won't have some extra skills for no reason. If I'm really strong and outstanding in real life, but in the game, I and you are purposely set to be on the same level for the sake of fairness. That would be really unfair. Alunnerai said calmly. You've been playing the game for a whole day, and you still don't know the essence of the game. How stupid. In short, the game depended on who grasped the essence of the game first, and who grasped the essence of the game first. Who would have more choices and higher chances of winning. Alunari wasn't the strongest in the original team of 7. At least 2 of them were stronger than her. However, they were either slow to react. Before they could fully adapt to the game, they were toyed to death by Alunari, or they weren't smart enough. They didn't understand the essence of the game until they died. So, they were all eliminated by Alunari in the end. As a small team of 7 people, they had a lot of experience. Starting from the first sacrifice, the time bomb had already been planted. The first sacrifice made everyone's alliance go up in smoke. Everyone started to reject and be wary of others. At this moment, if someone appeared who could win the trust of everyone or even most of them, then this person would have a high chance of dominating the remaining few. Alunari did it. Of course, she had her own ability to do it. At the same time, she needed a bit of luck. In fact, if she was more confident, Alunari still had the confidence to eliminate all of them in a few days. Being able to do it in a little more than a day was mostly due to luck. Even though those who were eliminated were unwilling, the outcome was already decided. However, the outcome was already decided. At the very least, their elimination was a foregone conclusion. This was an unchangeable fact. At that moment, Alunari suddenly sensed someone behind her. Alunari suddenly turned around. It was Carrie and Xiaohe. She remembered these 2 women. They were the 2 who gave her the identity card. "Why are you 2 here?" "We're the main antagonists," Carrie said with a smile. "More accurately, he's on your side." Xiaohe added, "You've passed the test of being a spy. You've done it perfectly. So in principle, no matter who wins or loses in the end, you've passed the test." "Am I out too?" "No, you haven't been eliminated. However, your quest rewards will be very generous. This will cause your in-game strength to far surpass other players. Therefore, if you continue to play the game, you don't need to use any tricks. You can just attack anyone from the righteous faction. That will basically guarantee you victory. Therefore, the positioning of your in-game character needs to be changed. Changed to what? You will be the 3rd boss. Once the righteous faction's players have gathered, you will have a battle with them. Don't need to win or lose. You can use your full strength. You guys are the 1st and 2nd boss. The 2 of us are the 2nd boss. The 1st boss is the sealed evil god. If the righteous faction's players can defeat us within 5 days, you've passed the game. If you can't defeat us within 5 days, regardless of whether you could defeat us or not, the evil god will be released from the seal. By then, all players, including you, can challenge the evil god. Then I've passed the game. There's no point in challenging the evil god, right? Of course there's a point. If you can defeat the evil god. No, even if you perform outstandingly in this battle, you'll receive an unexpected reward. Of course, this reward is hidden. What reward? Relic. Alunari sucked in a cold breath. Relic? These 2 women really dare to say that. Relic. Relic would be something that everyone in the world would fight for. It was even possible for it to cause a bloodbath. But this game, relic as a reward? Is this a joke? Don't doubt it. Our teacher can still take out a relic, Carrie said. Of course, the prerequisite is that you perform outstandingly. If you face the evil god and get insta-killed, then don't even think about it. Although I've passed the game, it's only the 2nd day. I haven't experienced the fun of the game yet. Alunari sighed and said with pity. Actually, she was referring to something else. If you want to continue playing, then continue with your original identity and remove the spy identity. But you won't get any point from a game until you defeat the evil god. That works? This game is meant for people to experience, and it's also a trial by our teacher. As long as it doesn't affect the balance and fairness of the game, you're welcome to try. Alunari thought about it and understood. The reason why she was given special treatment was probably because the organizers didn't expect her to pass the game so quickly and even obtain rewards that exceeded the game's balance. Even Alunari didn't expect it. In fact, it wasn't because she was too outstanding. The key was that her ex-teammates were too weak. With just a few tricks, they were completely annihilated. So much so that Aluntarai didn't have the chance to experience more of the game. Relic reward. Aluntarai suddenly had an ambition in her heart. It was something she had never thought of before. But now, the thought was uncontrollably growing in her heart. For Aluntarai, relic only existed in legends. As a matter of fact, the relic that she had heard of and the few that were circulating in the world were all illustrious. She couldn't even look at them, let alone own them. But now, she realized that relic wasn't out of her reach. Although it wasn't within her reach yet. But at least she had a chance to get it. Not to steal or rob. She could get it fair and square. The two women said that she would get it if she defeated the evil god, or if she performed outstandingly. So, there was a chance to defeat the evil god in this game. Although she didn't know how powerful the evil god was. But it wasn't impossible. She had deliberately said those words for Carrie and Xiaohe to hear. If it was just based on the reward she had gotten so far, it might have affected the game's balance. But it wasn't enough to guarantee that she could defeat the evil god, unless she could grasp more game information and rewards. Chapter 3072. Audrin and Manet walked out of the Dark Soul swamp covered in mud. The two looked exhausted. They had spent the night in the swamp. They had also fought the whole night without a moment's rest. Of course, they had also gained a lot. They wanted to rest, but they couldn't. Lying on the ground now was no different from suicide. They needed to find a safe place to rest. And the exit of the Dark Soul swamp was definitely not a safe place. But after a few steps, they saw someone coming alone. They remembered that person, Ilef. He was a short guy, less than 6 meters tall. But what really impressed them was Ilef's loneliness. Since the start of the supernatural youth fighting competition, Ilef barely communicated with others. And because of his loneliness, there had been a conflict outside the competition. Ilef also noticed Audrin and Manet. They stopped at the same time. They looked at each other warily. Manet, what do we do? His identity is safe, Manet said in a low voice. Safe? How do you know? Is your prophecy skills cool down over? No. Manet shook his head. But almost everyone knows his personality. Do you think the organizers will arrange a spy identity for him? If he's a spy and forcefully stays in a team against his personality, he'll probably be the first suspect. Audrin thought about it. That seemed to make sense. Our identities aren't random? Of course it's not random. Our identities and strengths are all arranged by the organizers according to our strengths, magic attributes, and personalities. None of them are random. For example, you and Ilev are people who would never become spies. Why don't you say yourself? I have a 50% chance of being a spy, Manet said. Manet said, among the 16 contestants, there are no more than 4 who are qualified to be spies. I'm guessing that there will be 3 spies. I'm not a spy, so there's a 90% chance that the other 3 are spies. Who are the 3 you think are? The first one is Aluntarai, who we met yesterday, Manet said. My impression of her is that she's good at socializing. I've met her more than once in bars. That means you go to bars often. All in all, she's a very smart woman. Once in a bar, she said that she was going to treat, but a few minutes later, she found someone else who was willing to pay for her. That doesn't mean anything. Do you remember that terrifying spirit from yesterday? After their team failed, she was the first to make the choice to sacrifice a companion. At that time, they had no other choice, right? You know, behind this game, there are countless eyes watching us. At that time, even if that smart woman sacrificed herself, it would be better than sacrificing her companions. But she made the most foolish decision. With her brain, under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have made such a decision. Unless she's on a different side from us, Manet said. In that case, what she did wasn't stupid, but a smart choice. A.O. DeLuin pondered for a moment. It seemed to make sense. So that woman is 100% a spy. Since you're so sure, why did you say it's only 90%? I haven't met the other 2 yet, Manet said. I can only say that with 16 players, the possibility of 3 spies is 90%, and the possibility of 2 or 4 spies is only 10%. For 16 players, 4 spies is too many, and 2 spies is too few, so 3 spies is a very suitable number, Manet said. The game has only been going for a day, so there's still a lot of information we don't know. I can't make an accurate judgment. At this moment, Ilev walked over from the opposite side. What is he doing? He can tell that we're not spies. How could you tell? Of course. With our combination, we can't be two spies. If one of us was a spy, the winner would have been decided long ago, so the possibility of meeting two spies is very low. Based on this premise, he can infer that we're players from the righteous faction. Before Manet and Aotlin could speak, Ilev said, I want to team up with you. Sure. Manet nodded. I'm a cursed spirit, beast king, observer, and son of God. Manet and Aotlin didn't expect Ilev to reveal his identity so easily. The two could only reveal their identity and profession. Your identity as the son of God seems a bit special, Manet said. I can choose my faction. In terms of character setting, I'm the child of the evil god. The two gasped. Ilev continued. Don't worry, I choose the righteous faction. Why? Because the righteous faction is weak. Weakness means better rewards. Your theory is a bit far-fetched. In RPG games, it's almost always the righteous faction that wins. I don't think so, Ilev said calmly. Although we're in an RPG game, it's still a real game. I've already met 3 terrifying existences. Since those terrifying existences can appear as NPC characters, then, as the final boss, the evil god, its power will be beyond our imagination. Perhaps we'll meet a real god. Of course, the possibility of that is very low, but it's still something we can't defeat through normal means. So, if we choose the righteous faction and perform exceptionally well, then the rewards will be very generous. Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, the sound of clapping came from the woods. Then Alunari walked out from the woods. In an instant, the 3 of them showed hostility. Looks like there are quite a few smart people here. Alunari looked at the 3 of them with admiration. At the same time, Alunari glanced at Manet. Manet had a vague feeling that she might have heard the conversation between him and Aotlin. And now, she appeared here without any of her companions around her. This meant that she might have eliminated all of them. This wasn't good news. She'd completed her identity mission, and it might have been more than enough. This meant that her rewards would far surpass the 3 of them. At the same time, it meant that the 3 of them would be in a very passive position. Chapter 3073. If I say I'm not here to fight you, would you believe me? Alunari smiled at the 3 of them, who were filled with hostility. The 3 of them shook their heads. Alunari didn't explain her identity when she appeared. It meant that she had acknowledged her identity as a spy. However, the next moment, the 3 of them felt the world was spinning and they realized they couldn't move. The 3 of them were shocked as they looked at Alunari in disbelief. How is this possible? How could Alunari be this strong? Look, if I was hostile, you would be dead by now. Alunari said, now, do you believe me? Ilev didn't say anything. Orden didn't say anything. Manet said, I believe you. Instantly, the pressure that the 3 of them felt disappeared. The 3 of them looked pale. They didn't expect Alunari to be this strong. I suddenly feel that being a bad guy isn't fun, so I've decided to switch sides. Alunari smiled and said, so I want to build a team that can win. The 3 of them didn't believe Alunari, but they had no other choice. Alunari was too strong, to the point that they felt hopeless. Manet's brain was spinning rapidly as he stared at Alunari. Suddenly, Manet's mind flashed as he vaguely guessed something. Alunari seemed to have felt Manet's strange gaze and turned back to Manet. Turning back to look at Manet, he said, you said you switched sides, so there are only 2 possibilities. One is that you have a special identity, like Ilev, and the other is that you've already cleared the game. Perhaps the game manager gave you special privileges, allowing you to switch sides. If you want to continue playing, there should be a direct benefit, right? This is my secret. If you guys clear the game, you'll get the same information. Because of this, you guys have no authority in front of me. You can either choose to cooperate or be killed by me. There are still half of the players anyway. You guys aren't my only choice. Manet shook his head and said, no, we're your only choice. Don't you have some misunderstanding about yourself? At the start of the game, The manager manually eliminated one player, and you killed 6. In other words, there are only 9 players left out of the 16. After a day, at least a third of the players who couldn't adapt to the game were eliminated. In other words, including you and us, there are only 6 left. Other than us, you can only find 2 to 3 more players at most. Plus, your individual quality and strength are still uncertain. It might not be hard if you want to clear the game with those 2 or 3 teammates, but if you want to complete the biggest challenge, like defeating the evil god, I'm afraid you're still lacking. The 3 of us have the quality and strength, so other than us, you need to find the remaining players to form a final team to challenge the evil god. This time, it was Alunarai's turn to be silent. If you wanted to change factions to experience the game, then you wouldn't hesitate now. After all, with your current strength, you might be able to clear the game alone. You could even kill all the remaining players and become the only player to clear the game, or even clear it twice. However, you didn't do that. Instead, you used the excuse of teaming up with us. Therefore, your goal is definitely not as simple as clearing the game as a player from the righteous faction. You want to challenge the final evil god. Manik continued. The difficulty of defeating the evil god is undoubtedly unprecedented, which also means that the reward will be unprecedentedly generous. That's right, the reward for defeating the evil god will be very generous. Aluntarai didn't deny it. When communicating with smart people, lying would only cause them to lose the possibility of cooperation. Of course, Aluntarai didn't have to lie. She had the initiative to reveal the information. In terms of strength, she also had the absolute advantage. So she only had to hide the most important thing, the reward for defeating the evil god. Aluntarai looked to the 3 of them. Defeating the evil god will bring unparalleled benefits to everyone, so there's no reason for you to refuse, is there? Indeed, but you will surely get the biggest reward. I'm the strongest, and I'll be the one who put in the most effort. So isn't it natural for me to get the biggest reward? Aluntarai said as a matter of fact. And without me, you might be able to clear the game, but believe me, you won't get the best reward. I want to know what the final reward is. All I can say is that it will surpass your imagination. Aluntarai's vague description easily caused the others to have endless fantasies. Manet turned around and looked at Audrin and Ilef. What do you guys think? I can accept it, Ilef said. I'll listen to you, Audrin said. Fine, then we'll accept your invitation. That woman called Aluntarai has great abilities, wisdom, and luck, but I really don't like her methods, an elite said. She's from the evil alignment, Jalanash said. This means that she has to win using unconventional methods, so I think there's nothing wrong with her methods. She was actually able to eliminate all 6 in one day in a 6-on-1 situation. I think her overall abilities are above average, and she has great potential. In the supernatural organization, there were 2 completely different opinions about Aluntarai's performance. One side was disdainful and even disgusted by Aluntarai's schemes. The other side supported Aluntarai. They felt that all of Aluntarai's actions were normal, and she was using the rules cleverly. As long as it was within the rules, it was reasonable. Qin Zhao hadn't seen the first day of the game, so he wasn't sure about Aluntarai's performance. But he still saw her performance on the second day. President, who do you support? You're judging her morals, but you've never doubted her abilities. As for her morals, we're not judges, nor are we picking saints. At the very least, she did a great job as a spy, didn't she? So, in principle, I support her. So, President, you support her joining the supernatural organization? I've seen her information. She's from a small family, but it's a branch of a large European family. I don't think she'll be interested in the supernatural organization. Chapter 3074. The new members recruited by the supernatural organization were mostly from small families or spiritualists. They didn't have much background or power. Although Aluntarai was also from a small family, her knowledge and family background were definitely different from other small families. So, even if the supernatural organization was interested in Aluntarai might not be interested in the supernatural organization. Don't say that the supernatural organization had its own pride. Since they were talents, they still had to fight for what they should. After watching the live stream for a while, Chun Zhao drove home. Frigga was teaching little Jerlin and Larissa. Jerlin could already use a few low-level spells. Larissa didn't learn anything. She was brought around by Frigga every day and watched Frigga teach Jerlin. To Frigga, Jerlin's innate talent was absolutely astonishing. Jerlin could learn all the low-level spells after seeing Frigga use them once. Even Frigga, the Queen of Gods, had never seen Jerlin's talent. But Frigga wasn't in a hurry to teach Jerlin advanced spells. Even advanced spells weren't difficult for Jerlin. But what Jerlin lacked now wasn't advanced spells, but magic knowledge. After all, Jerlin didn't need to fight now. Ordinary spiritualists might lack advanced spells. But neither Chun Zhao nor Frigga lacked advanced spells. Cultivation was similar to construction. Tall buildings were built from the ground. There was no such thing as a castle in the air. Chun Zhao was like this, and so were the other cultivators. Even a god needed to grow from a young god. Suddenly giving a regular person the power of a god. What were the consequences? They would either explode or go berserk. Frigga was the god of magic. She'd taught many children. Even Odin's magic was taught by her. She knew what a talented child needed. The more solid the foundation, the higher the height in the future. As for little Larissa, she was still too young. She didn't even know what danger was. Therefore, before little Larissa had a clear understanding of magic, neither Chun Zhao nor Frigg would teach little Larissa magic. Jerlin hadn't started learning Nirvana yet. It was the same reason as little Larissa. Nirvana was too dangerous. When he came back, little Larissa and Jerlin jumped into his arms. Frigga walked slowly to Chun Zhao. "Are they good?" Chun Zhao asked. "If you insist on my answer, then I'll do as you wish," Frigga said with a bitter smile. "Teacher Frigg, I'm very obedient," Jerlin replied with her eyes wide open. "I'm not being disobedient. Using fireballs to fry fish is not something a lady should do. Where is Jerlin going to hit with the fireball?" "About Vanaheim. When do you plan to do it?" "I need to prepare and find helpers," Chun Zhao said. Just like the last time he went to Asgard. This time, he was going to face Zeus, a god king like Odin. No matter what, Chun Zhao wouldn't act rashly. Moreover, Frigga had said that she had not only sealed Zeus, but the entire Olympus. Even Frigga could not provide any more information about Zeus. Therefore, he had to be more careful. From the information Chun Zhao had about the Olympian gods, Chun Zhao could tell that the Olympian gods were very powerful. Zeus was stronger than Odin, not weaker. First of all, the characteristics of the two races determined that the Olympian gods were better at war. As a god king, Zeus' strength might be similar to Odin's, but in terms of battle prowess, he was probably much stronger. Most importantly, when Chun Zhao had faced Odin, Odin had been a remnant soul. He had less than 10% of his strength, but even so, he was still in danger. What about Zeus, the king of the Olympians? How strong would he be? Also, when Frigga unlocks the seal, will Zeus be the only one who comes out? These days, he had been studying the Olympian gods. Of course, most of the information was obtained from Ares. Ares, on the other hand, had no inhibitions. He said whatever Chun Zhao wanted to know. He seemed to have sensed Chun Zhao's intentions. He even challenged Chun Zhao to a fight, wanting to participate in the battle. Chun Zhao had always been doubtful about this, even though he had signed a contract with Ares. But would Ares really be willing to fight for him? Nevertheless, Ares was still someone Chun Zhao had to pay attention to. As the god of war of the Olympians, Ares' strength was undeniable. As for helpers, Chun Zhao had contacted everyone in his small group. Zhang Tianyi, Bifla, and Mary, the 23rd blood. They had all given him an answer. As long as Chun Zhao's price was high enough, they were willing to help. What good things did the Olympians have? That was a must. Frigga had sealed the Olympians along with Mount Olympus. The Olympians were a bunch of bandits and locusts. They kept waging wars and robbing other races. So, there must be a lot of good things. But Chun Zhao didn't know what the scale would be this time. So, Chun Zhao was considering if he should find 2 more helpers. But these helpers wouldn't be from the supernatural organization. Even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to help. So, he couldn't find anyone lower than Shang Qing. Qin Zhao wanted to find perfected Qingping and perfected Wu Su from China. Both of them were strong enough to deal with this, but he didn't know what they wanted. Qin Zhao wanted to have Zhang Tianyi ask them first. Then he would see what they wanted. Qin Zhao's attitude toward this battle was even more than when he'd fought against the Aesir race. After all, he didn't know that he wouldn't be facing just Odin last time, but the entire Aesir race. But it was different this time. When Frigga opened the seal, who knew if a Zeus or a bunch of Olympians would come out? So, the preparation might take a month or a year. In any case, he would only act when he felt that he was fully prepared. Frigga didn't rush Qin Zhao. After all, she knew that this battle wasn't a child's game. It would be a battle of the gods. An unprecedented battle that might not happen in 100 years. It wasn't surprising that he didn't prepare anything for this battle. For Qin Zhao, this was an unprecedented gamble. It was even more risky than fighting against the Aesir race. Last time, Qin Zhao had been tricked by Bader. But this time, Qin Zhao still went in despite knowing the danger. After all, a complete world was a huge temptation for Qin Zhao. Chapter 3075. It took Alunarai, Orderon, Manet, and I left 2 days to get there. Finally, they found a lone player and invited him to join their team. This was also the only player they had found who was alone. They were pretty sure that everyone else had been eliminated. Their team was also the only 5 people left in the team. They were the only hope of the righteous faction. If all 5 of them were eliminated, the evil faction would win immediately. The 5th member was also a lone player. She was also the 2nd female member after Alunarai. Her name was Haley. Haley's achievements were quite impressive. She had taken out 2 spies and eliminated 2 players who had been tricked by the spies. In other words, Haley had eliminated 4 players on her own. After listening to Haley's explanation, everyone was surprised by Haley's ability. Even Alunarai might have been eliminated by Haley when she wasn't familiar with Haley. Alunarai was also glad that Haley wasn't part of the team when they first formed the team. Otherwise, she might have been eliminated by Haley, just like the few people who were eliminated by Haley. Manet confirmed that Haley wasn't lying through her teeth. Haley's first identity was the cleric, and her second identity was the saintess. Both identities had special abilities. Her third identity was even more special, the chief judge. When she activated her ability, anyone who lied in front of her would have their abilities halved, while her abilities would be doubled. Similarly, she couldn't lie to anyone. It could be said that Haley's third identity was the bane of spies. The deception skills that spies had were completely useless in front of Haley. That was why Alunarai was glad that she didn't meet Haley earlier. Otherwise, Alunarai wouldn't be able to hide anything from Haley. Also, it was almost impossible for her to defeat Haley when she was lying. After confirming that they couldn't find any other players, the team of 5 started exploring the entire map. They had searched every special area. The team's ability gradually increased, and they also obtained many special items. At the same time, they obtained more and more information. The 5 of them arrived at Death Canyon. This was the last special area they could search. Haley was the NPC of Death Canyon. All right, enough with the nonsense. My test for you is that you need to endure my attacks for an hour or injure me. Everyone was eager to try. After all, their strength had increased significantly over the past few days. Shall we begin now? Manet asked. You can open. Before Helis could finish her sentence, Orderon attacked first. He strode forward and threw a punch at Helis. With a wave of her hand, Heres released a cloud of black gas. A bone claw reached out from the black gas and grabbed Ao Deluin in the air. Please wait until I'm done. Helis tossed Audrin a few meters away. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They had all witnessed Orderon's strength over the past few days. In terms of combat strength, he was second only to Alantir. However, he was instantly subdued by the Gothic girl in front of him. This Gothic girl was so strong. Could they really last an hour against this Gothic girl? Even Alunarai felt hopeless. The difference between them was too great. Don't worry, I won't attack you directly. Then, Helith raised a hand. The ground they were standing on began to loosen, and white bone claws extended from the ground. 10, 100, 1,000. Countless skeletons stood up. All right, your opponents are them. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air again. So powerful. Such powerful undead magic. The goth girl looked younger than their age. However, her strength was unbelievably strong. The individual strength of these revived skeletons was very weak. However, when their numbers reached a certain level, they would be like a real army, causing people to feel despair. The team began to defend against the siege of the skeletons. They had formed a certain level of tacit understanding and cooperation. However, as the battle went on, their stamina and magic power were being depleted quickly. They also began to make mistakes in their teamwork. However, they all had a large amount of magic equipment and tools. No, we can't let this continue, Alunari yelled. We have to stop her. Otherwise, our game will end here. Aluntarai, can you stop these skeletons alone? If it's for a short period of time, I should be able to, Aluntarai answered. How long? 5 minutes. You're responsible for stopping these skeletons. The 4 of us will attack that woman together, Manette said. Manette was not trying to defeat Helith. Based on their lineup and the strength Helith had displayed, it was almost impossible to defeat Helith. Therefore, their strategy was to disrupt Helith's rhythm of casting magic. The skeletons that she summoned also required a huge amount of magic power to maintain. If they could disrupt Helith's magic output, then they could force her to stop summoning the skeletons. However, when the 4 of them surrounded Helith, Helith still used one move and subdued the 4 of them. Too strong, she did not give them any chance at all. Alunari was also a little desperate. They had thought that with the special area they had found and their knowledge of the game, almost no one could kill them instantly. However, Helith had changed their knowledge again. The 4 of them were directly trapped in the bone prison and could not fight back at all. Seeing that the 4 of them were trapped, Aluntarai could not hold back anymore. Aluntarai threw out a metal ring and injected all her magic power into it. Instantly, the metal ring gave off a shocking light. The light engulfed the entire area. Even the black gas around Helis was annihilated by the light. At the same time, the bone prison that trapped the 4 of them and the skeletons around them were destroyed. Aluntarai weakly sat on the ground. This was her trump card. It was supposed to be used against the evil gods. She did not expect to use it now, but she had no choice. If she did not use it now, then they would all die. Then the evil gods would not be able to do anything. Ring of Annihilation, not bad, but you did not unleash its power. If this is all you've got, then I can only apologize. The black gas around Helith circled again. At the same time, she raised her right hand and pointed at Alunari. The black light flashed. Aluntarai was already in despair. Even her trump card was unscathed against Helios. Chapter 3076. Suddenly, a figure dashed in front of the black light. Alderaan, the black light went through him. However, he weakened the power of the black light. Ilef formed a strange hand seal with both of his hands. A triangular shield made of light appeared in front of him. The black light landed on the triangular shield and was deflected away. However, the triangular shield was shattered as well. Ilef fell to the ground weakly. Alunari and Helis didn't expect Alderaan and Ilef to stop them at all costs. Alunari reacted immediately after the momentary lapse in concentration. Aluntarai pointed her palm at Helis. The moment Alderaan landed, a purple light burst out from Alunarai's palm. Arcane Barrage. Countless arcane cannons were fired at Helis. Using spells outside the game. Helis didn't do anything. The mist of death around her automatically swept away. All the arcane bullets that came into contact with the mist of death instantly dissipated. It's useless. The fog of death can kill everything, whether it's living or dead, Harry said indifferently. Aluntarai's lips curled into a smile. I know that's the death mist, and I know its characteristics. If it was during normal times, facing a monstrous spiritualist like Helis, Aluntarai would run as far away as she could. Fortunately, this was a game. At least, in this game, no one would die, be it an NPC or an enemy. So Alunnarai had more time and opportunities to deal with the enemy. She could also try more methods. At least, she didn't have to worry about her life or death. Suddenly, the death mist in front of Helios exploded. Helios took a step back and looked surprised. But then she couldn't help but smile. Congratulations, you've passed. Helios looked at Alunnarai. Not a bad plan. The death mist was a special existence that could attack and defend. It could also kill spells. However, it required a process. Spells like the arcane cannons would quickly destroy the death mist. The arcane cannons wouldn't even be able to penetrate the death mist. However, Alunnarai hid another spell inside the arcane cannons. A purple star, an extremely dangerous spell. As long as it touched a physical object or was affected by other magic, it would immediately explode. He hid the purple star in the arcane spell barrage. Apart from the resemblance between the two, it was also because of the instability of the purple star. The purple star would not wait for the fog of death to dissolve it. The moment the death fog touched the purple star, it would cause the purple star to become unstable and explode. As a reward, each of your weapons will be enchanted with the ability to harm or even kill the gods. At the same time, I also have a message for you. In order to kill the gods, you need to gather the dragon's blessing, the death curse, the devil's poison, and the power of God. If you lack any of these conditions, the difficulty of facing the gods will increase exponentially. Helith glanced at the injured Audrin and Ilev, and the mist of death spread out. What are you doing? Don't be nervous. I'm just giving them some treatment. It's an extra gift. The mist of death shrouded the two of them. Helith looked at the three nervous people and smiled calmly. Not only can the death fog devour the enemy's life force, it can also return life force. Although the amount is small, it's still good for their injuries. The life force that the death fog devoured did not disappear into thin air. Instead, it digested the life force and used it to strengthen itself. Therefore, as long as the death fog continued to kill, it would continue to grow. However, for a powerhouse like Helith, who was only one step away from the Shangqing stage, there was no point in strengthening the death fog, especially when it came to killing. The death fog was very useful, but it was not very useful in battles of the same level. Therefore, the death fog could also weaken itself and return life force to others. Of course, the amount of life force returned was quite limited. Because of the contamination of the death fog, normal people would not be able to withstand too much life force. Otherwise, the death fog would directly contaminate the other party, which would instead cause more serious problems. Generally speaking, this life return skill was quite useful in battles to save oneself or one's teammates, or to quickly heal a certain degree of injuries. However, relying on this method to obtain a large amount of life force was undoubtedly a pipe dream. After the death fog receded, Orderon and Ilev slowly stood up. Orderon, Ilev, how are you? A little weak, and I'm hungry, Orderon said. I've only slightly healed your injuries. That doesn't mean they've recovered too. I suggest that you find something to fill your stomachs after you leave this place. There are many small animals in this forest, Helith said. Harold said, All right, you have obtained the curse of death from me. You can leave now. Alunnarai glanced at Helith. Can I ask you a question? Go ahead. Did you really fall for my plan just now? Or did you purposely go easy on me? Our levels are too different, Helith said calmly. If I'm too serious, you won't have any chance of passing, Harold said indifferently. So you're saying that you purposely went easy on me? No, the plan itself was quite good. I was able to discover it because of my uniqueness. If it was someone else, they probably would have fallen for it, Helith said. And I admire your wisdom in battle. How about joining my team after this game is over? My team lacks an intelligent member. Your team? There are 5 teams in the supernatural organization, Helith said. I'm the leader of one of them. Are the other team leaders as strong as you? Our team leaders are about the same. What if I refuse? Helith shrugged. Then I'm sorry. Aren't you going to do something? You're not worth me breaking the rules. Looks like I'm not that important. The information you received earlier is how much we value you. We are even willing to offer such a valuable prize for you. However, this prize is not something that can be easily obtained, Harold said. However, you're not the only choice. I need to think about it. Alunarai did not answer Helith directly. Helith smiled. She knew what Alunarai was trying to do. She was worried that if she refused now, she would lose the chance to get the relic. She was worried that the supernatural organization would do something behind the scenes. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.